The clerk will read the order of the day. We're moving to general business.
General business notice number 1, standing in the name of Ms Uibo to move a motion concerning a budget.
Just before we go to the Leader of the Opposition, I would ask that that debate around this be considered in view of Standing Order 83, a motion which anticipates business already on the notice paper. Although the wording of this motion is very different, the debate that will ensue could be very similar to the debate that we're having today around the appropriation bill. So I would remind people who are contributing to this notice, this motion, not to make it a budget speech, essentially, which is basically would be duplicating what we're having later on and what we've already had today around the appropriation bill. So please, I call the member for Arnhem to speak.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I appreciate the clarity around Standing Order 83, so I'll take note of that. Madam Speaker, when we have a look at the state of affairs here in the Northern Territory, and particularly the Territory's economy, we know that there needs to be some heavy lifting. This is the opportunity to lead the Territory's economy. I think whoever's in government, that's what Territorians expect. And unfortunately, we're not seeing that here in the Territory, Madam Speaker. Some of the points in my motion I have spoken to already. I'm noting your point around Standing Order 83. So I'll focus on some of the key areas which are priorities for our Labor opposition team, Madam Speaker. So cost of living, which is something that I've been speaking about to Territorians right across the length and breadth of the Territory. It's very clear that every day, more and more people and businesses across the Territory are starting to feel the pinch. The hip pockets are starting to shrink a little bit more, and people are starting to be concerned that the cost of living is really impacting on their families and on their daily lives, and particularly on their businesses that are here in the Territory. So I think some of the measures that my team and I have spoken about publicly, particularly when with air connectivity and connections and the ability for the Northern Territory to get ahead when it comes to services and routines. And I know, Madam Speaker, in your hometown of Alice Springs, air connectivity is so important. You know, from Alice Springs, you're 2 hours to some of the major cities in the southeast pocket of Australia. So that movement, that ability to either be able to do work, to visit family, friends, to access services that aren't available in the Northern Territory, and, you know, to have holidays as well, to have a break and then come back refreshed and keep doing what we do when we love the Territory. That ability for air connectivity here in the Northern Territory is so important. So, Madam Speaker, I did put in a submission the committee and the inquiry that the Federal Parliament is running around specifically inviting and wanting to see the federal committee members come and do hearings here in the Northern Territory. I put in a couple of examples in my submission around some of the pressures and cost of living that people in my electorate are quite a remote electorate. Bearing in mind, I also have RAF-based Tyndall in the Arnhem electorate, one of the biggest and busiest defence bases in the country. Very proud to represent RAF-based Tyndall. But even having a major RAF defence posting in just outside of Katherine as the regional centre here in the Northern Territory comes with challenges itself. The cost of building at the RAF defence bases here at the Darwin RAF base is significantly higher. And if anyone who's done their homework or anyone who's visited Katherine and Tyndall lately knows that there is a significant amount of works planned with defence here in the Northern Territory for Tyndall, and some of the new development there is forward-facing for US Marines. Some of the new technology, the new Triton hangar has been completed and handed over and is now actioned. It's the home of the F-35 Lightning II jet, Madam Speaker. That's the very fast flash jets. who will be participating in 2 very big operations later on this year. So when we're talking about cost of living and work and doing business in the Northern Territory, we know that Territorians are feeling the pinch right across all of our electorate. So to be able to have a budget that delivers or addresses some of those concerns, notice, of course, the language that the CLP is using for the last day and a half is everyday Territorians, like they've just discovered that everyday Territorians exist. I don't know which type of Territorians the government's been talking to, maybe not everyday Territorians, but they've discovered that everyday Territorians exist, so they're starting to now focus on everyday Territorians, so it's great. I wonder what the definition of an everyday Territorian is, because if you live in the Territory, you're here every day. So I'm not sure who they're targeting with this budget. I'm not sure where the cost of living measures, and they've, heard some answers earlier today rattling off a list of, well, this is what we're doing, and this is, well, no. If it is existing programs, if it is existing initiatives, if it is existing vouchers, that is not cost of living relief. That is general business of government maintained. So it is a maintenance budget that we have seen this year, just yesterday, less than 24 hours, or just over 24 hours, Madam Speaker. So quite ironic when the Chief Minister made her big song and dance that the federal government budget money that comes to the Northern Territory is purely repairs and maintenance budget. And she has done, Madam Speaker, the exact same thing with Bill Yan, the Treasurer of the Northern Territory, the member for Namatjira, at the front line. He's been pushed to the front and, irked into the spotlight to put forward the very, very dismal Northern Territory budget. So he's in the firing line. He is leading the charge for the CLP government. And yesterday, Madam Speaker, there were 4 ministers who spoke around portfolios, and not a single one of them sounded excited. Not a single one of them sounded like they actually believed their own words in how good the Territory's budget is this year, how great the CLP's second budget is. Well, guess what, Madam Speaker? It's 2 budgets down. It's only 2 to go for the next election, and not one single vision from the CLP about the future and the Territory economy growth. Not a single centrepiece of vision that is going to lead the way and be a legacy for the CLP government in this term. So halfway done, halfway left. There is not a vision. So in just under 2 years, it seems like they're already out of ideas, Madam Speaker, because most of the projects that are being completed or finalised right now, particularly in the infrastructure space, have been started or were costed or were planned and were projected and maintained, if they weren't cut already, by former Labor planning, from the former Labor government for the planning. So if they weren't cut by the CLP government in last year's budget, some of them have resurfaced as well, Madam Speaker. Some of them have been tucked away for 12 months and then dusted off and brought back on to look like, oh, great, we're delivering this, or we're going to be planning the way. But cost of living is simply not part of the CLP's budget, Madam Speaker. I think we can all attest to that. And anyone who says otherwise would be very, very happy to see, other than that list, we'd already explained some of the projects, programs, initiatives that are already in budgets, 3, 4, 5, 6 years ago. They are not cost of living measures, Madam Speaker. So there is a clear difference with that. The pipeline of works, Madam Speaker. Another key Labor priority for my team is around infrastructure and the pipeline of works. And I say this expression because I have had it said to me right across the Northern Territory, from businesses, from contractors, from key industry stakeholders. And that use of that word is physical as well as metaphorical. The pipeline of works is drying up in the Northern Territory when it comes to infrastructure. And I apologise, I don't have my budget books here, but I have them upstairs on my desk. When I got my budget pack yesterday, there's 2 papers that I always read very carefully, Madam Speaker. I'm sure you've got your favourites as well. but two of my favourite budget paper books since I was a backbencher in 2016 is the agency budget book, which shows every single costing for every single line item in the government. I always look at that. So that's what I was highlighting yesterday, in case anyone wants to know. Number two, as a bush member, my favourite, and the member Barclay will know this, I'm sure by experience, because he's out there getting lots of selfies. My favourite budget paper as a bush member, Madam Speaker, is the infrastructure plan book, the budget paper that outlines the infrastructure plan for the Northern Territory, which used to list every single bridge, culvert, road section, kilometre, every single detail. This was my favourite budget book. When I got a pipe dream, there we go, member for Catherine obviously is lost touch with her electorate, because I don't know if anyone's driven from Catherine to Darwin, but that's probably the worst section of the Stuart Highway I have ever seen in my 16 plus years of driving that road, Madam Speaker. And I wish that the CLP government would fix it, member for Fannie Bay, but sounds like the Treasurer and the Minister for Infrastructure must fly over that section of road a lot coming up from Alice Springs and never driving it, because it is by far the worst and the most dangerous piece of road that I have driven in nearly 2 decades, Madam Speaker. And I say that honestly. I even asked someone I was travelling with, am I just looking at this from a different perspective because of where I'm living, the job that I've got, and the advocacy I have to play? And the person I was travelling with said, absolutely not. They have driven this road longer than I've been alive, that's for sure, and that it is a very seriously dangerous piece of road. And I've had a conversation with one of the members of the CLP government, and I'm not going to out them because I'm sure that they have the same concerns, and hopefully they're articulating it to their teammates as well. But that piece of road is one of the dangerous. And I drove, Madam Speaker, a couple of weeks ago, the whole section from Alice Springs. Actually, I drove from Darwin to Catherine, Catherine to Tennant Creek, Tennant Creek to Alice. Then I drove back the reverse a week later, Alice to Renner Springs to Catherine, and then Catherine to Darwin. So I've done that whole chunk of road. And I didn't go see you, member for Barclay. I apologise, but next time I will. I'll be there in July. It always gives a good cuppa. It's always great. The sections of road I noted, and I get very sceptical, Madam Speaker, when someone says that the road is bad, because I have driven some pretty bad roads. I'm a bush member. I can see the ups and downs, especially straight after the wet season. The roads are pretty crap. And that's, you know, the nature of those bush and unsealed roads, which we are continuing to advocate so they do get sealed. But I was very sceptical when anyone, particularly when they're talking about the Stuart Highway, says, oh, the road's bad. And I go, you know, they haven't seen bad roads. I travel out bush, I see some bad roads. But it is dangerous. And I've said to people in the last couple of days in particular, when I've heard someone's travelling, I say, watch out for the potholes. They are dangerous. I have never, ever had to say that to anyone travelling to and from Darwin and Catherine, past down there to Mataranka and my electorate as well on the Stuart Highway before you turn off on the Central Arnhem Road or further down on the Roper Highway. I've never had to physically warn people about the potholes on the road, because my fear, Madam Speaker, is that if we get some more of our drive market back, I know the fuel shock and crisis globally has put in doubt our tourism season, particularly this year, and I'll feel the pinch with some of my electorate businesses, pretty tough times, and very concerned about what may or may not come this dry season, is that a caravan or an inexperienced driver will be driving along the Stuart Highway and will either get caught on a pothole, have a tyre pop. I passed 4 cars a week ago at night time, all pulled over in pairs, changing tyres. So everyone was safe, but all changing tyres. Even heard all the truckies on the two-way road. Oh, the effing potholes. I won't, you can guess what they said. But I've never had to warn people about the danger of the highway of the Northern Territory, our main highway of connection, the Stewart Highway. And I'm worried of an inexperienced driver, someone in a small car or someone towing a boat, caravan or trailer will have a tyre pop and then something will go wrong. So that I have that fear in my mind, and I often am travelling that part of the road on my own. I try not to travel at night, but the last 3 times I've travelled, it has unfortunately been at night time, and very alert and aware of the dangers of the road. My worry is that not every driver will drive to the conditions. So please drive to the conditions and let's get those road fixed. But the pipeline of roads and works. So I picked up my budget infrastructure paper, Madam Speaker, and it was as skinny as the Treasurer's speech. I thought, surely that's not the annex of the budget infrastructure book. And I double-checked all the titles, I flipped open, and I was extremely disappointed. My most favourite budget paper as a Bush member has completely been dwindled away to a couple of pages to flick on. So that physically represents the concerns that I have heard, my team has heard, when it comes to the drying up of the infrastructure pipeline in the Northern Territory. Businesses, when I was in Central Australia, construction and civil works businesses who I met with were extremely concerned and sceptical. They're keeping on employees, apprentices, trainees in hope for some of those government tenders to go out for the normal forward-facing works and jobs that they apply for, that they are not having that same sequence of doing a job, getting ready for a new job, and then job ready, and off they go with the work. So this is a huge concern. And I would say, Madam Speaker, to the CLP government, particularly to the Treasurer, who is also the Infrastructure Minister, if he is not hearing those same concerns, to get out there in his own patch of Alice Springs and that area, as well as everywhere else, and talk to those construction companies about their real concerns, because that skinny budget paper on infrastructure planning for the Northern Territory was abysmal and disappointing. And that's for me as a Bush member who always looks for what's coming up in my electorate, let alone the concerns and the burden now that is on our Territory businesses in civil works and construction. One of our other priorities, Madam Speaker, one of our priorities is around education, jobs and training. So the workforce, which I've sort of spoken a bit about, keeping the workforce here, growing our own, making sure we have the right settings here in the Northern Territory to attract skilled workers, to retain skilled workers, and to ensure that we have skilled workers ready for our future industries is something that we back, Madam Speaker. We always maintain, it's probably one of the very few things that we agree with the CLP government, that the Northern Territory should be looked at uniquely when it comes to attracting and retaining migrant skilled workers to the Northern Territory. I note the member for Port Darwin spoke about the DAMA, that's the Designated Area Migration Agreement. We are in our 3rd iteration of the DAMA. We were the first jurisdiction in Australia to sign our DAMA, and then other parts of the country started to follow. And forgive me for rubbishing Gold Coast, but I do not see Gold Coast as a regional centre or a regional area, but apparently they have the status. So every time I get a chance, Madam Speaker, whether I'm in Canberra or if I'm up here, I say they have to. The federal government has to change and make sure that there is equity in those regional incentives. The Northern Territory is considered, the whole of the Northern Territory, including Darwin, is considered regional when they're looking on the little maps in Canberra. So why is the fastest growing city in the country, the Gold Coast, considered a regional area? It just blows my mind. So I've maintained that argument, Madam Speaker, formerly in government and now in opposition. I'll continue to maintain that argument. But the DAMA, so I do thank the member for Port Darwin for her work and her department's work in signing the 3rd DAMA iteration for the Northern Territory, but we do agree and maintain that we need to maintain a strong and active pursuit of skilled migrants here in the Northern Territory and supporting our international students, not having a specific cap from the southeast coast, because the territory is unique. We love it, but we want people to come here, stay here, live here and love it. And international students are so important for the fabric of the territory's community, but they also put down roots here. They get jobs, they grow families, they bring family members because they love the territory. And so encouraging that and not being inhibited by a specific cap when it comes to international students or skilled migrants in the Northern Territory is something our team supports. So we keep advocating for that. We know that our federal colleagues, Luke Gosling, Marion Scrimgeour and Senator Mullendiri McCarthy are all of the same mindset. We need to sort of sing all from that same page in the hymn book when it comes to attracting more international students, not having caps on our territory numbers as well as those skilled migrant numbers, Madam Speaker. So we do agree that one probably small thing with the CLP government. So education, training and jobs is key to all of that, as well as forward-facing. When you have a pipeline of infrastructure works, you can get your apprentices through. You've got your 2, 3rd, 4th year apprentices. I've had some great stories where some apprentices have finished their qualifications and started their own businesses here in the Territory. What a great story. I heard that down in Alice Springs as well, Madam Speaker, and you probably know some of those businesses and companies yourself. So having that as a key priority, we were underwhelmed when we looked at some of the projects and programs for education and training. You know, the member for Catherine mentioned my speech earlier today, and the specific piece of infrastructure for one of the schools that has missed out last year, the millions of dollars for the Ali Kurung school has come back on the books, but it's been sliced in half. So why do the children and the staff of Ali Kurung school deserve half of the funding that they were allocated over 2 years ago? That's what I said to the member for Catherine. That's why she should hang her head in shame. And I'm sure the member for Barkly, who is reading up on the budget book, so it looks like over there, because he probably doesn't want to speak out against his own team, absolutely agrees. Ali Kurung, whether it's a Labor government or a CLP government, Ali Kurung School absolutely deserves that investment in infrastructure. But it should be the full amount, Madam Speaker. It should be, I had 7 million, I believe it was 8.7, so a member for Barkly, I'm sure, can correct me, but it is over double what is in the budget books now, Madam Speaker, so I will make that point. One of our other key priorities, Madam Speaker, for the Territory Labor team is partnerships with Aboriginal Territorians. We have seen the hurt, the frustration and the lack of willingness by the CLP government that has caused the hurt and frustration with many Aboriginal Territorians and organisations and corporations across the Northern Territory, because the idea of looking equally at Aboriginal Territorians and seeing them as a key stakeholder is not in the vocabulary of the CLP government. When we're talking about 1/3 of Territorians, then this is an absolute shame that no partnerships, no real investment in Aboriginal affairs. I could not, and I haven't, again, my books are upstairs, I could not even find the agency line item for the horribly named Aboriginal Strategic Partnerships Group or whatever it is. It's been completely downgraded. It is not its own office under the CLP's decision of last year. I could not even see where the budget for that specific division now, it's not an office, it's a division, it's just a unit somewhere in the ether of the CLP government's, you know, many, many departments that they changed over under the machinery of government. And I actually felt a pang of sadness that all the work from that particular unit, division, whatever they're called now, poor things, is not front and centre. It is not about driving partnerships with Aboriginal Territorians and focus on leadership and solutions broking. There is almost no commitment whatsoever. We know that the CLP broke their very own election commitment in 2024 leading into their first budget of 2025 when they promised, they made the election commitment in black and white, and it was Bill Yan, the Treasurer, when he was the Shadow Treasurer, of the $12 million for the Aboriginal Ranger Grants program. A small amount of money in the bigger scheme of life when it comes to the Territory budget, but an absolutely important and critical commitment. We made the commitment, Labor did, so did the CLP. Bang, off you go, your first budget, CLP government, in May 2025, and completely cut. We asked question after question about how the CLP government, who is supposed to, in that prior election period, do their own costing, their own fiscal responsibility costings when it comes to election commitments, that they don't even have to do themselves. They just put it all through Treasury. They broke and lied about that commitment to Territorians. So that shows that they have not learnt from the mistake of last year, because that money has not been reinstated in the budget of yesterday, and that is an extreme slight and shame on the CLP government, Madam Speaker, and that's just one example. One of our other key commitments, Madam Speaker, and I've spoken to 4 of them, and the 5th one is health. The CLP government has shown in the nearly 2 years of governing the Northern Territory that the CLP is only being reactive when it comes to health. Now, this is an interesting one, Madam Speaker, because health affects everyone across the Northern Territory. It's almost like education. Everyone's got an opinion on education. Everyone's always got an opinion on health. They're one of the biggest areas. And I commend the Australian Medical Association of the Northern Territory, the president, who spoke very strongly on ABC radio this morning about how lacklustre and disappointing the CLP's budget on health was this year. Now, we've heard from the Health Minister yesterday and in other commentary throughout question time that there is a record spend in health. Well, we know majority of that money has come from the federal government, and so it should. I'm not dismissing that at all. So it should. But the lack of planning that the CLP has in health services and health infrastructure across the Northern Territory is frightening. It is deeply concerning, and I think Territorians are actually starting to question, does the CLP care about our health system? Do they care about our health workforce? Are they going to govern in the way we would expect any government, Labor or Liberal, when it comes to investment in healthcare for Territorians? And we saw the politicking, actually, no, not the lack of regard and lack of respect, the sheer politicking of last year's CLP budget, which cut the $20 million that was allocated for the Gumbalanya Health Clinic in the member for Arafura's electorate, but they kept the CLP's Barclay commitment around $20 million for a new Borroloola clinic, both very much needed, but guess what? The government member got what they wanted and the opposition member didn't. So the people of Gumbalanya, otherwise known as Owenpelly, miss out because of that disgusting minded of politicking when it comes to health. Oh, we won't worry about that. That's not a government member's seat. Let's just punish the people of the Arafura electorate in Gumbalanya community. They didn't put it back on the books, and I'm sure the member for Arafura will talk very strongly on this as well. And that is an absolute shame, because I know the Health Minister did promise that the next budget would have it. This is the next budget. Yesterday was the next budget. The Gumbalanya Health Clinic is not in the budget books. So if anyone cares about what your team over there, the CLP team, is doing when it comes to health, at least ask that one tiny question. Well, why aren't we supporting health infrastructure in all parts of the Territory? Because the Northern Territory government is the government for the whole of the Northern Territory. It's not just the government for the CLP seats. So have a think about that, and perhaps in the next 2 chances you get, you could rectify the lack of pointed focus and infrastructure planning when it comes to supporting our workforce and the health services in the Northern Territory. And I know that the Health Minister was a very sore point yesterday when it comes to maternity services, and the question and the very desperate attempt to try and shift the blame. Or where's Labor in talking about maternity services? Well, he's either not doing his work or he's closed his ears and his advisors aren't telling him. We have been talking about the NT Health maternity services here, particularly for Darwin, with the loss of the private maternity services, for well over a year and a half, I think now, if you want to count it from when the CLP must have first learnt in October 2024 when they came to government, when they didn't call, and I mean the health minister, he could have asked me, I had the federal health minister's phone number still, but waited until after the federal election. Admission by the health minister himself, Member for Barkly, yesterday. Oh, we waited until after the federal election.
Could you pause, please, Opposition Leader? Member for Nightcliff, what's your point of order?
Madam Speaker, Standing Order 43, I seek an extension of time.
Is an extension granted? All those in favour say aye, to the contrary no. An extension is granted. Please continue, Opposition Leader.
Thank you very much, Member for Nightcliff. And I think Member for Fong was going to as well, so thank you very much. So the process of asking the federal government to give assistance, like, I don't care if you have to go and beg, because if it's for the benefit of Territorians, go and do it. Like, I'll do it in opposition, but really and clearly the responsibility lies with the Northern Territory government. So go and do your job, go and ask the federal government, and do it when you learn about the problem, not waiting and hoping that, oh, well, let's hope that the federal Liberal government's going to get in and then we can be matey-matey with them. No, I don't care who's in government in Canberra. Go and do your job and ask for that assistance. Make sure the Territory doesn't miss out, because Tasmania did. They didn't miss out. They went straight to the Health Minister and they got the assistance they needed for Tasmania. Northern Territory rested on their laurels. The CLP didn't bother to get on and hammer the federal government minister, the Health Minister. No, they waited until, oh no, now we actually have to go and do something because our team didn't get in federally. Now we've got to go talk to the federal Labor government again. Could have done it 6 months before the federal election and actually got the Northern Territory a win. But what beggars belief, Madam Speaker, is the work that we have done in opposition in uncovering some very disturbing behaviour by the CLP government in not actioning or accepting proposals that were made by, we understand, 2 private obstetricians who worked in past tense because they're not working in there anymore, worked in the Darwin private maternity ward, came up with proposals on how to keep the maternity services in the private hospital running. The proposals went to the CLP government, we understand, and they either didn't reply or didn't accept. I'm still unsure about that. So maybe the member for Barkly in his health portfolio can shed some light, because I have tried to find out whether it was declined or just not answered. And that has become such a routine of the CLP government to completely dismiss. I would say, if I have to go and do a count back of all the correspondence I've done as either the member for Arnhem, but particularly as the opposition leader, and how many correspondence pieces I have not had answered. And I understand, because I've been in government, so I know it may take a couple of weeks, but there's probably only 3 ministers who, sorry for them, but I write to very, very regularly, who bothered to respond. There's probably 1 minister that chooses not to, and that's the leader. Maybe out of every 10 example, I'll go back and do my work, but as an example, every 10 pieces of corro that I send, I might get maybe 1 response. So it is a sheer lack of respect of the job that I do, but a job representing the electorate that I am very honoured and privileged to hold in this parliament, but getting them an answer. And I saw that at the height of its worst, I would say, and I've heard about nasty governments, but I've actually seen and experienced it now, but at the height of the floods and the pending cyclone, the lack of information, care and respect from some of the CLP ministers in getting information out. So I had to go to other sources, which when there's a crisis, I think everyone knows, all bets aside, it's about saving lives, saving property, saving livelihoods. And some ministers, thank you so much for doing your job and getting back to me and being so quick and responsive. But other ones should definitely hang their head in shame, because it became a disgusting political game when we're talking about what we could have done together in getting messaging out, in getting responses back, but then also the recovery process. And I do thank, the member for Catherine for the work she's done in the $100 million recovery phase. There's other things that I don't agree with that she's done, but I absolutely support the work she's done in that space. And, bringing Mr. Ken Davies, PSM, out of retirement again. He is very well respected and he is very efficient across the Northern Territory. I think everyone from all sides of politics would agree. And being able to spearhead that recovery, I think, has been probably one of the small saving graces of the CLP in the aftermath, because there are a lot of people hurt, a lot of people frustrated, a lot of people extremely unhappy with the government's response when it came to the floods from the east to the west and the north from the south to the north. So I think a lot of remedial work in terms of public relations, let alone recovery and forward planning. So I thank those ministers who did not let politics get in the way of communication, information and actual response and care and thought for the people of Arnhem that I represent, but also the role that I have as the opposition leader in being able to try and do some bipartisan work when the time does call for it. So, Madam Speaker, there are our 5 priorities as a Territory Labor opposition. Cost of living, we've said, infrastructure and housing, which go hand in hand, health, education, jobs and training, and Aboriginal affairs. So they're all of the areas that my team and I are concentrated on. They're all of the areas we have been unpicking initially when it comes to the budget. They're all of the areas, the reason why I've put this motion up today in General Business Day, around the lack of economic vision, and it comes from the top, Madam Speaker. It comes from the leader of the day. It comes from the Chief Minister who leads the CLP government, ministers and backbenchers alike, and we have not seen a single centrepiece of economic prosperity in any of the CLP's budget. Last year's one, nor this year that we've just seen handed down yesterday. So the lack of growth to support the Territory's economy, the language that is being used is very, very tricky. It's very misleading, I would say, Madam Speaker. And our regions, and I understand, you come from a very important region in the Territory. The Central Australian region has nothing, no projects at its feet that are going to drive the economy, that are going to grow the Territory's economy. And there are some good things in the budget that are around infrastructure pieces. There's obviously the maintenance budget that you guys have delivered, that CLP has delivered as well, when it comes to just kicking on with all the other projects and programs that were already afoot and that people expect that the government will do all the time regardless. But in terms of creating any centrepieces, no, nothing big for my region in Big Rivers, definitely nothing for my electorate of Arnhem, but that's because the CLP is malicious and small-minded and wants to punish the people of Arnhem just because they have a Labor member representing and speaking up for them. Pardon? Yeah, Maud Creek, that's great. That's one of the smallest little rivers that we can have. And I did say I supported the member for Catherine with some of the work she's done. And we've seen, again, it's maintenance work. It's great. That bridge is already there. That road is already sealed. How about we get off the track? I know that the member for Barclay is probably the only one who actually travels out bush. Why don't you guys go and listen to him and understand the travel that he does, to understand the importance of our road network, the importance of infrastructure planning. And maybe, Madam Speaker, maybe I'm going to be too optimistic, but maybe next year the budget paper will be a little bit thicker when it comes to the infrastructure planning, because it was skinny. It was extremely skinny. And I literally double-checked that I had the right booklet. So I just flabbergasted that the CLP government is trying to spin their maintenance budget as now the language that they're using. It's a budget for everyday Territorians. Would love to know who those everyday Territorians are, what the criteria is, what they should be looking for, that is new from the government, that is being developed by the government, that has been the vision of the CLP government, because I am desperately trying to see in those budget books where there is something that is going to grow the Territory's economy, where we're going to see the growth of jobs in the Northern Territory and supporting those sectors. And, you know, Madam Speaker, in the short time I have remaining, I know that the CLP loves to blame, you know, the former Labor government, the 8 years and how terrible and a mess. But they really love taking credit for all the things that we did do well or we did do right. It's almost like those 8 years of the former Labor government don't exist. It's like, oh, great, look over here, this is what we're doing. And when they want an excuse and a blame without taking accountability or responsibility for themselves and their abysmal budget, then they start, you know, playing the blame game of the former Labor government. So they're almost bipolar in the sense of presenting what's good and bad for the Territory, and they love taking credit for some of the successful Labor projects and infrastructure that we have seen delivered in the timeframes under the CLP government that were started, costed and planned for under the former Labor government. So, Madam Speaker, I commend my motion to the House.
Member for Fong Lim.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Just bear with me for a minute. Madam Speaker, the motion in front of us today is entitled A Budget That Fails Territorians. And specifically, the motion contends that the Assembly condemn the CLP government, the Whanokirauga government, for delivering a budget that completely fails Territorians, delivering 4 things is the claim. 1, no real cost of living relief. 2, no pipeline of infrastructure works. 3, no plan to support the growth and prosperity of critical job-creating sectors. And 4th, no economic vision for the future of the Northern Territory. Now, that's a subjective claim, the idea that this budget completely fails Territorians, but it can be fairly quickly objectively dispensed with. Just prima facie, the reality of it is that prima facie, the fact is we are providing cost of living relief measures. There's, you know, 290 million of them or something in there. There is extra, that's indeed. No pipeline of infrastructure works. Well, again, that's just hyperbole. There's mention of exhaustive infrastructure works, and the Leader of the Opposition has just pointed out at great length everything that's articulated in budget paper number 4. So once again, flat out wrong. No plan to support the growth and prosperity of critical job-creating sectors. Well, I think you'll find, again, if you go through the actual papers, there's extensive reference to the 5 sectors that we as a government have been focused on from the beginning and continue to be focused on. And finally, the most generic charge that there is no economic vision for the future of the Northern Territory. And that's a fair enough claim. And that's a philosophical argument that you're making. And that is a philosophical argument that I think is worth debating today. And I thank the Leader of the Opposition for the opportunity to be able to discuss it. Because, Madam Speaker, as you rightfully pointed out, it is unusual to have the opportunity to discuss budgetary matters in the middle of a discussion of an appropriation bill. And I thank the Leader of the Opposition for affording the House, with her precious time on General Business Day, the opportunity for us to zoom out and think more broadly about budgets, beyond critiquing just the virtues of specific commitments, to think about budgets, success and failure, indeed. I think it's a very useful exercise for all of us, noting that we have precious time when we're giving actual budget speeches to talk about the nuts and bolts of what might be happening in or for our electorates. Now, let me just begin by saying budget time is always a complex time of the year for me. It's no secret that I have a lot of opinions about our economic affairs. And this time last year, I deliberately chose to abstain from providing economic commentary in May because I didn't want to provide mixed messages in any form, and it was for the Treasurer to articulate a message and a vision for the Northern Territory CLP Whanokirauga government. And that is precisely what he did last year. And I'm delighted now this year to have the opportunity to get behind my learned colleague, the Honourable Treasurer Yan, in support of this budget. Because I find it remarkable that people would make a claim that this budget has no economic vision. On the contrary, what it has is, for the first time in a decade, some semblance of logical consistency. It's actually a coherent budget. It's not a fantastical wish list of utopia-esque nonsense. It's a continuation of last year's budget, and it is consistent with the priorities the government has articulated from day one. Now, here's the rub of it. You may not like those priorities. You may not like the prescription for how we are trying to rebuild the economy, reduce crime, restore lifestyle. But it's unfair to suggest that the budget has no vision and that it is a maintenance budget. Do you know what it is? It's not a maintenance budget. It's an honest budget. It's the first one in donkey's years that actually makes any sense. Where the gap between budget paper 1 and budget papers 2 to 6 isn't total fantasy. That's the reality of what we're actually dealing with for a change here. And isn't it a crying shame for the opposition that we can't just keep on milking from the magic money tree to keep on announcing what is new and what is special and what's razzle-dazzle in this budget? Well, that's not how budgets work. And that's why we're tens of billions of dollars in debt, because it is the former Labor governments who had no real economic nous and demonstrated over a really long period that they thought budgeting just meant spending money. But budgeting is about institutionally saving money and institutionally stopping the wastage of money and institutionally figuring out how to make money as well. And that is where the former Labor governments have failed us. Now, this budget, as I said, is logically consistent and coherent, and it bridges the gap between budgetary rhetoric and budgetary reality for the first time in a decade. And I'm going to return to that concept substantively and exhaustively soon, the gap between rhetoric and reality. But first, notwithstanding the fact that this is really a discussion not about budget 2026-27, but really about the higher order arguments here, it behooves us to consider some of the remarks that have been made in relation to this budget, noting that the motion itself is entitled "A Budget That Fails Territorians," to contextualise both the motion and subsequent contributions that are going to come in the ensuing debate. No plan, no future. That's what we've heard so far. This budget is no plan, no future, maintenance budget. I don't think so. I think you'll find that anyone with a serious economic or accounting head, or any sort of basic financial acumen for that matter, would recognise that there is a much shorter gap between budget paper 1 and budget papers 2 to 6 in this set of budget papers than in any of the papers for the preceding decade. Cost of living pressures, no direct relief. Again, just prima facie wrong. Missed opportunity. Well, those are pretty rich words considering a decade of wasted opportunity in terms of being able to reposition our fiscal and financial affairs. Now, lacklustre, visionless. I think it's pretty ridiculous to say things like that. I mean, what we have is a plan that we are actually sticking to. That's what we have. And sorry, it's not a fun times plan where we just keep on reinventing new nonsensical things that never actually manifest in reality, but it's a real plan. And it's a tragedy that there aren't more members around to hear about that concrete plan at the moment. Housing stress, something again that was reflected on in generic terms. Well, seriously, whose fault is that? Where's the housing that was meant to be created over a pipeline of delivery over the last decade? Like, we really have to start getting a grip on reality here in relation to some of the debates we have here, particularly on economic affairs, where we demonstrate absolutely disgraceful lack of subject matter understanding, let alone expertise. My favourite one, population growth is stalling. Oh my God, I can't have this conversation again. I don't know how many times I have to explain it in this place. The bottom line is that we are stabilising the population situation, which the former government was tanking. I can go through these numbers again and again, but really I'm just going to be referencing old speeches and wasting precious time that I want to be talking about other things with today. But the bottom line is we are stabilising population growth in and around 1.1%, which I don't think is great, and I think we can do a whole lot better, and I imagine we will. But the former Labor government, in the last 4 quarters, before we took over office, quarter on quarter on quarter, we're dropping under 1% population growth year on year. We were down to 0.7% year on year population growth in the last quarter of data available before we took over. How many times and how many ways do we have to explain this? Like really, how many ways do we have to explain this? I mean, budgets are about more than spending, and the Leader of the Opposition clearly does not understand the basics in that regard. And you know what? Thank goodness the cavalry from Nightcliff is rolling in. That fella can apparently count. I think he's an engineer by trade, and I'm waiting in earnest to hear the member for Nightcliff's contribution, because Lord help us if he doesn't provide something on the literacy and numeracy front from the opposition benches. Razor cuts. Really not helpful language. That's the kind of rhetoric that is dragging down the quality of debate and the understanding of the issues. Razor cuts. Show me razor cuts in this budget. Why is that kind of language being bandied around again? For dumb political games. It's really ridiculous. Capitalising on windfalls. Oh my God, that's another one. The pot calling the kettle black. I mean, the entire last 8 years' worth of Labor budgets are essentially saved by the grace of accounting adjustments and GST recalculations from the federal government. They didn't make any money in any of that time. More prison cells. Yes, 100%. You've got us. We're building more prison cells, or at least trying to allocate money to figure out how to build more prison cells. Because, like it or not, we need more prison cells. We probably need a whole lot of other things as well to get to the root causes of crime and to rebuild our society and to rebuild our economy. But right now, $15 million to start thinking about how to sensibly plan new men's and women's prisons is not about investment. And here's the rub of it. It's what should have been done and what was purported to have been done by former Labor governments. So yes, you've got us. We're interested in building new correctional facilities so that people aren't sleeping like sardines in watch houses. Delivery of major projects. Oh Lord, I mean, I can't talk about it again. I've done too many of these. I mean, look, even a broken clock is right twice a day. Sure, a couple of the Labor projects, the major projects, the portfolio of 75 major turkeys. Of course, a couple of them came good, but I think we can all safely say that, you know, the majority of those were fantastical promises on paper and had very little substantively to support them. Clear plans for land release. That's another one. I mean, what did the former Labor government do with its own Bringing Land to Market report? What happened to all the work that Dick Gwoja did? I mean, we are reinventing the wheel year on year, and it is part of the reason why the Northern Territory cannot economically emancipate itself. The new hospital. Oh God, hollow criticisms, no actionable solutions from the other side. That's the thing. I will say this without bringing another debate into this. At least there are some members of this House that are offering alternative economic ideas. Some of them, I think, are not grounded in economic reality and mostly involve fairy dust and organic vegetable collectives. However, at least they're new ideas. Because the fact is, on the actual opposition benches, I'm yet to hear a single economic idea of any worth or any credibility in relation to how we grow the economy, grow demographically, create sustainable opportunities for people. It's just more of the same. Spend more. Spend on things that we spent and keep spending on. Ask for more money. More money will fix the problem. More money will not fix the problem. And that's why this is a budget grounded in reality, where the Treasurer has had to do some actual hard work and say, all right, I cannot overnight redress all of our debt proposition, but what I'm going to do is at least slow down the rate at which we're accumulating debt. And that's a laudable objective, because you can't just pull a hard handbrake and crash the economy and crash the society and completely, remove the entirety of the bloated public sector, right? That's not what we're seeking to do. We're trying to reprioritise frontline workers, get rid of back office staff, create a more efficient and productive economy over time. But it starts with it is literally turning around a massive barge at this point. And I don't envy the task the Treasurer has in that regard, and I think he is not getting a fair shake, and I do not think the critique coming from the other side is fair in that regard in relation to explaining the budget that we have positioned. Again, the narrative on we will lose, insert key worker, healthcare worker, nurse, whatever it might be. The suggestion that the former Labor governments over 3 lots of leadership had any idea how to attract or retain population in this place is laughable. Stop talking about it until you come up with a better set of ideas. Really, seriously, stop talking about it. You're embarrassing yourself. Lectures on education from ministers who presided over the systemic decline of public educational offerings in the Northern Territory, it's just unbelievable. It is shameful. And you know what? I think our Education Minister is giving it a right royal crack. She freely admits she's not a teacher and she doesn't have an education background, but she's somebody who believes everybody should have access to opportunity and is doing her level best to try new ways to create that to happen. And the focus is very much on fundamentals, and that's what we've got to go back to at a time when our public schools are obviously, empirically, not doing as well as they were in the past, despite the heroic efforts of educators themselves. Labor's economic model over the last decade just speaks for itself. It just speaks for itself. Half-hearted signals to market on how to make money and begging the Commonwealth for more. And how's that plan going for you? How's that plan going for you? The reality of it is that trying to get resources out of the ground as fast as possible, attract private investment as fast as possible, and hope the Commonwealth work with us and are generous, that's not new. We're doing that the same as they were doing that. We're all trying to do it more efficiently and more productively. But that's not going to happen overnight. And in the meantime, we're in charge of managing our own economic affairs. And that means not just spending money, but like I said, having a vision and a plan for how we utilise our funding and how we stop wastage and how we position ourselves to be a more attractive investment proposition. And that is what my learned colleague's budget does. And I'm sorry, but some of you need to get better tooled up on understanding what a budget is, how it works, what can be done, what cannot be done. It's not just about spending. It's not just about asking for more. And cherry-picking out, singular commitments to try and make a case is just weak. The case this morning, for example, that the only growth sector is correctional services, that is rich, coming from 3 lots of governments that presided over unconstrained public sector growth, which has disinhibited and cannibalised the prospect of private sector growth in the Northern Territory. That's the reality of it. Everyone here knows it, and it's time to face up to it. And my learned colleague is facing up to it, and the Minister for Public Service is facing up to it. Right? That's what we're doing. We're paying our wages bill without putting it all on credit for once, and we are trying to prioritise frontline services, and we are trying in earnest to start turning around our wages bill, which is the single biggest drain on our finances. The Treasurer has delivered an underwhelming budget. Oh, I'm sorry that it's not razzle-dazzle and fireworks enough for you. Maybe if we spend another $15 billion, it'd be exciting. But that's not what we're going to do. What we're going to keep doing is chipping away at trying to slow down the rate at which we waste and speed up the rate at which we improve productivity and growth. And that's going to take time. And in the short run, you know what that means? It means things like state final demand might not look as sexy as you want them to look. But here's a hot tip. Go and do some research and look at the other periods of state final demand when they've been negative in the Northern Territory's growth cycle. We're not hiding those figures. We're just not trumpeting them from the rooftops because at the moment, they're not that exciting to talk about. But we expect them to improve. And the forward estimates indicate that they will improve. And there is an economic cycle to these things that suggests that they will improve. An economist called Alfred E. Kahn in 1966 wrote a paper that was very influential called The Tyranny of Small Decisions, Market Failures, Imperfections and the Limits of Economics. And I won't go into it exhaustively, but the bottom line is that it builds the case for how individual small choices and transactions cumulatively delivered unintended, large, undesirable or suboptimal outcomes. And that's kind of what's happened over 8 years of Labor management of our books, right? I don't think it was necessarily malicious, negligent intent. I think it was more ineptitude than malice that got us to where we're going to. And you can divide that period, that epoch, into sort of three rough zones. You sort of have 2017 to 2019, which let's call generously aspirational budgeting, okay? And then let's talk about 2020 to 2022, where you've got, frankly speaking, fairly insubstantial budgeting. And then in the last phase of 2023 to 24, again, generously, let's call it exigent budgeting, trying to save the furniture before you're going to get turfed out. Now, it is really, really a great opportunity for us today to think about those three epochs because they teach us a lot. They teach us a lot. And what they really basically show us in a nutshell is that the Territory Labor governments, 3 times over, who held power from 2016 to 2024, presided over a period that was characterised by significant fiscal volatility and a growing disconnect between, as I began my speech, rhetoric and reality, between budgetary rhetoric and between economic outcomes. Because whilst budget speeches emphasise budget repair and jobs of the future, what the actual data revealed was a deepening reliance on federal GST transfers and a burgeoning debt profile. Here they are. Here are 8 years' worth of budget speeches. Here's the one we're not allowed to talk about today. Not going to talk about it. I'll come back to talking about how awesome that one is later. Let's talk about these 8 and what's wrong with these 8 budgets and why we're in the hole we're in right now. I won't go through it line by line. What I'm doing is pointing out 10, just my top 10 indicators of the difference between budgetary rhetoric and economic reality for why we are in the hole we are in now. The first one is the structural deficit paradox, right? In 2016, Labor promised to address structural deficit inherited from its previous government, presenting a plan for budget repair, a roadmap to fiscal sustainability. Back when you might recall, debt was like less than $2 billion. The reality is that rather than repairing the budget, the structural deficit has widened, right? By 2024, we're projecting fiscal balance deficits through to the end of the decade. The government's inability to align expenditure with its modest revenue base meant the repair was perpetually deferred. That's what happened. They just kept kicking the can down the road. And what my learned colleague has done today, last year not as much as I would have liked, but today, in this budget, he is starting to face that harsh reality. It ain't much fun getting in front of the press and saying, I don't have shiny trinkets for you all. I don't have shiny trinkets and promises for you all. But we're starting to do the work of repair whilst trying not to also gut the place of its last bit of life. The second point between rhetoric and reality where there's this massive gap is on actual net debt per capita, right? Now, successive treasurers kept arguing over that period, 3 of them in a row, that debt was a necessary tool to fund critical infrastructure and social services during economic downturns. In short, we're going to spend our way out of the problem, and we have to spend our way out of the problem. It's the only way out of the problem. That is, in essence, what happened 8 times over. Read 8 of these in a row, and that's what you'll find. In reality, by 2024-2025, net debt was projected to reach $12 billion, eventually climbing to 14 by 2029. And on a per capita basis, as a result, we were left books where the NT is the most indebted jurisdiction in Australia. That debt to revenue ratio, often cited as a measure of sustainability, blew out to beyond 120%, leaving our credit rating extremely vulnerable. Now, fortunately, it's stabilised for the present purposes. But again, it's not lazy debate for us to say we were left a disastrous state of affairs. That's the truth. That is the honest truth. The honest truth is that this place was fiscally mismanaged over the last 8 years, and possibly a little period before that as well. But the fact is, that's the ship we're trying to turn around at this point. The third one I alluded to before was this over-reliance on GST windfalls. Now, Labor often framed, over those 8 years, budgets as a result of disciplined financial management. I'm sure we've all heard that one before. The actual budget improvements, the reality of the situation, were almost entirely driven by external factors, specifically higher than expected GST relativities and pool growth from the Commonwealth. And without the federal government covering approximately 70% of our revenue, our costs, the territory economy would have been insolvent. The reality is that accounting and GST recalculations, more than anything else, are what created windfalls in this set of 8 budgets. The fourth one, I won't go into in detail, the failure to achieve population growth targets. If you go through those budgets, you'll find reference, particularly in 2018, to the population growth strategies and the laudable objectives to boost the population to 275 and then 300,000 by 2030 to secure more GST and drive domestic demand. None of that happened. And I can talk about it in forensic detail another time. I'm simply going to say right now that, once again, understand that the Territory has struggled with chronic net interstate migration loss. The periods where we've had positive interstate migration are when we have correlated with stimulating housing supply, which is one of the things that we are trying to do again right now. The Darwin ship lift. I mean, I just can't. I mean, look, the reality of it is it started off as 100 million. It is now 850. There are so many reasons why it shouldn't be what it is now. I freely confess to the fact that I am not privy to enough of the information to make all the assessments and judgments on this. But what is clear, and what is a matter of public record, is that the project has become a symbol of infrastructure mismanagement. It's been characterised by significant delay, and it is now thought of as lacking in transparency regarding its commercial viability. We didn't start that process. We are now trying to deal with that total, I won't use the word that I want to use. The sixth gap between rhetoric and reality is on private investment and stagnant private investment. I'm the one pointing out that private investment is not what it should be here right now. And we are having those conversations because we are able to have a mature discussion about our economic fortunes. But don't think that private investment suddenly just collapsed when we came to office. It's essentially been stagnant from 2016 onwards, right? Each budget speech from that point onwards talks about unlocking private investment through territory-led projects. Now, aside from the Barossa gas project, private investment has basically always been tepid through that whole period. And I'll talk about state final demand again, but the bottom line is that over those 8 years, today getting on your high horse and talking about state final demand is negative now. What are we going to do? Yeah, it's at 0.3 now, and it'll be at 0.8, and then it'll bounce back, and over the forward estimates in the cycle, it'll improve again. But suggesting that it was always going gangbusters in the last 8 years is pure nonsense. Pure nonsense. The failure of projects being revoted is another critical one that we just don't pay enough attention to. And what we're talking about here is basically each year, hundreds of millions of dollars in infrastructure spending were revoted. That is pushed to the next year because projects failed to ever get started or they were delayed. And this has created this phantom stimulus where the government gets the headline for the spend without actually delivering on the jobs or the assets on any sort of proposed timeline. Contrast that with each one of these, where each time around it's like, we're proud to announce record infrastructure this year, record-breaking stimulus to the construction sector. None, it's not real. These are literally just like, they're not worth the paper they're written on, is the bottom line, those promises. Another one now that we're on our high horse about in a massive way, the cost of living and the utility price squeeze. Again, go and do the actual work on the numbers and you'll see where governments kept claiming to protect Territorians from inflationary pressures by subsidising power and water. In real terms, that's not what happened. In real terms, Darwin remained one of the most expensive places to live in Australia because of a range of structural factors, and the government's decision to maintain high dividends from government-owned corporations like Power and Water arguably in some ways helped paper over budget deficits and acted as something of a stealth tax on residents. That's really what's happened there. We're an expensive place to live and work and do business. And the only way that you change that over the longer term is by bringing in more inputs into the system. More capital, more ideas, more labour, etc., etc. And you can't do that unless you create a more robust investment climate and a place that's more backable. And that's why you've got to do the hard work of ripping the Band-Aid off and starting to turn around the debt position really slowly and signalling to market that we unequivocally back the extractive minerals and gas industry, because only then do you have a fighting chance of actually creating an investment climate that people want to honour.
Yes, sorry.
Under section 43, could I request an extension of time?
Extension granted? Aye. Extension's granted.
Thank you to my learned colleague for that. Housing supply and homelessness are the ninth major point of a gap between rhetoric and reality that I really want to draw out. None of us wants to see an absence of housing. Nobody wants to see homeless people. None of us want to be punching down on our social services sector. And I don't think that's what we're doing or intending to do in any sort of malicious, nefarious way. But equally, let's not make out like 8 years of Labor governments were saintly in their pursuit of resolving all of these issues, right? Significant funding was allocated to remote housing and urban renewal to address anti-housing crises over that period. But it wasn't done in a particularly coordinated, robust, or reliable fashion, and we know that because we know we're continuing to do the same thing over and over again to try and resolve problems that are not intractable, but that have not been able to be effectively resolved. The reality is the NT continues to have the highest rate of homelessness per capita in the country. The reality is that wait lists for social housing are stagnant, and the private rental market has become increasingly unaffordable. And, you know, particularly in Darwin and Alice Springs, that's the case. And the delivery of remote housing has been plagued by bureaucratic bottlenecks and failing to meet, you know, the urgent needs of Indigenous communities. Now, again, just failure to understand economic basics. Like, by way of footnote, when we created Cullen Bay, you're right. Not everybody could afford to live in Cullen Bay. Same as right now, not everybody can afford a $750,000 house with a $50,000 home grant. But the knock-on effect of creating Cullen Bay is you create headroom in the market for people to move out of Fannie Bay into Cullen Bay and from people to move from adjacent suburbs and so on and so forth. You get the point here, right? You have to create supply and you have to do it where it's economically viable. I'm not going to talk about the budget or the specifics today, but once again, more of those $50,000 grants are happening in Northcrest, in the electorate of Fong Lim, where houses are actually being built and people are actually taking up the option than anywhere else. And those people that move into those suburbs are coming from the northern suburbs, by and large, which creates capacity in the northern suburbs. Not necessarily social and affordable housing, not necessarily utopia-esque solutions, right? But that's what you do. You've got to create more supply. I wasn't fully in love with the plans that we had for generating supply. I would do some of these things slightly differently. But the fact is we're doing something that is demonstrating results. It is working. There is large uptake. The uptake is slowed down in some regards. It may slow down some more. But either way, we're building new houses. And existing people are moving into them. And it creates more houses for other people to move into. Right? You can't start with social and affordable housing all of the time. And we are doing work on half round 3. And once again, where was the work being done by the last government on making sure that we had enough half money to fill in holes in the ground? My favourite hole in the ground, and it breaks my heart because I'm powerless to do anything about it, it's so buggered at this point, is Shear Street. The last Labor government knocked over all of that social and affordable housing, promised to put something in that gap, and now there's a giant bloody hole in the Narrows that I can't do anything about in the short term. And it's because of the failure of long-term planning of the last Labor government. They should have acquired the planning and the approvals and the funding to be able to replace like for like in that space. But instead you've got people in the Narrows going, when are we going to see something other than just bare grass out here? And finally, and probably the most important one, public service bracket creep. I mean, the government in 2019 announced a hiring freeze and efficiency dividends to curb public sector costs. The reality is that employee expenses continue to be the largest single drain on the budget, and by 2024, our public service has grown so significantly, also remembering all this crazy consultant spending that we were doing that we have reined in. You know, that's created a rigid bucket where nearly every dollar that we have in revenue gets tied up in wages, leaving little room for the strategic economic pivots that keep being promised in budget speeches over and over again. So look, just a quick recap. You know, budget rhetoric, actual reality. Net debt, logic about manageable and sustainable. No, we're the highest per capita in Australia. GST reliance, we're working in strategic partnership. No, we are 70% vulnerable on the Commonwealth. The ship lift, 100, 850. Go figure. Population, 275 by 2030. No, chronic net negative interstate migration loss. Infrastructure, the favourite hobby horse of the Leader of the Opposition. Infrastructure, budget paper 4, apparently a favourite one. Record delivery. Here's 8 lots of record delivery. Massive revotes. That's what you got. Massive revotes and project delays. The fact is the Territory Labor period was defined by a transition from aspirational planning to crisis management in budgeting. That's what it really was, where the reality of the NT's small, volatile economy eventually caught up with their high-spending rhetoric. So once again, I'm sorry if my learned colleague's budget is too maintenance for you. It's a sincere, honest attempt to start bringing fiscal integrity back to our budgeting and to signal to market that this is a place that is trying to grow sustainably and is prioritising a coherent narrative, which is make the place safer for everybody first. So it is a record spend on correctional services, crime, police, and here, I'll give you this one for free. Turns out everyone knows I ain't much of a social conservative, but I'm the most fiscally conservative guy in this whole building. Like, I would have us be much, much tougher on fiscal discipline. But the Treasurer has made a call and balanced it, we're all behind it, and it's a sensible way forward. But to suggest there's no logic to it, there's no economic vision, there's no narrative, no, here's the vision, make the place safe. Make communities want to stay here. Make it easier for people to do business here without worrying about their businesses getting smashed to bits. That's the narrative. That is the narrative from the top down, from the woman who's been here for 5,000 days and her team surrounding her. And those of us that have been here for 5 minutes are happy to get behind it and give it a go. Because the fact of the matter is, what happened over, the majority of those 5,000 days wasn't very compelling in terms of delivering an actual return, socially or economically, for the people of the Northern Territory. Borrowing to pay the bills is not something that we've just pointed out today. In 2018, Labor's own Lagerland report was scathing in its reality check about frontline services. Population stagnation, the $12 billion boundless possible nonsense. It was nothing more than a marketing campaign, not a strategy for population growth. We are actually tackling that issue. Education, record spending versus bottom decile outcomes. Once again, despite having the highest per student funding in Australia, the NT's educational outcomes are the worst. And we are actually facing that reality and actually trying to turn that around. Myself working now in partnership, under the auspices rather, of the Minister for Education. Public sector growth, non-frontline bureaucracy grew significantly. We know it did, don't pretend it didn't, and we are trying now to prioritise frontline workers. Housing and cost of living. Again, the budget speeches talking about rising costs and affordable housing. Well, you really need to look at what happened with CPI over that period and understand that our CPI often outpaced national averages, and as a result, we've still got the same systemic problems in housing that are going to take longer to turn around, and yes, are going to take cooperation with the federal government. And if you'd like to help us with that, that'd be fantastic. But if you just want to throw stones and be unconstructive, really, stay out of it. And I'm not going to get into it in detail. But the bottom line is the speculative industry fiascos that we pursued over 8 years, right? Rocket launches and amphibious aircraft. That's the reality of what diversification looked like under the former government. That diversification resulted in spend on consultants, overseas travel, project management costs for negligible return on investment. And it essentially demonstrated to market we were commercially incompetent, and it risked taxpayer equity on high-stake ventures when core infrastructure like roads, which we all want to see fixed, were deprioritised. The fact is state final demand will turn around, but right now it is not what we'd like it to be. But it's not a case of it's not our fault. I'm saying that it's the reality of what we inherited. And I've just explained at length that today because I think it's important to finally get on the record that, yes, it isn't our fault. We did inherit a lot of these structural problems because of poor, negligent, incompetent decision-making. Our state final demand always goes down after periods of construction of major projects. You know, it happened post-ICFIS, COVID, it happened again. There's a downturn now that we can see is happening. Now, the bottom line is the Labor government can get a participation award for its efforts, but really it's failed economically on budgets. And the irony is that this is the first budget in donkey's years, in a decade, where we are not failing Territorians and we are finally being honest with them about the state of our finances and about a way forward. And on the basis of all of that, I thank the Leader of the Opposition for the opportunity to flesh this all out in detail today, because I think it'll be extremely useful for all of us going forward so that we stop wasting time peddling fantasies about what Labor did in its 8 years of managing our economy. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Any further speakers? Member for Arafura.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Budget that fails Territorians. Every time I come in here, I talk about investing in the regions, in the remote regions, to stop people from coming in for services. Instead, they should be out in the communities receiving that service. MVR, health systems, creating jobs out there. When I look at the budget, I don't see anything specific except funding to boosting up to the internet services in some of the communities and some money for Kakadu. But I've got like the fourth biggest electorate. Nothing specific about Menengrida, nothing specific about Gunblanya Health Clinic, out the door. I've asked for members on the other side to come and look at the clinic because it doesn't fit. It's not fit for purpose. It was just a building that the community chose to go and use as a clinic back in the 80s. Right now, it's falling apart, it's crumbling, and I know there's money put in there to to restructure it and put some safety things in there just to make it work, but they definitely need a new clinic out there. We're just trying to see some clear plan for our remote communities and our regional hubs. We find that I've looked at it as fast as I can, and I'll look at it at the weekend. But it's more about punishing instead of preventing in the judiciary space. So when I heard the member for Fong Lim talk about the prison cells, we need them. That's not the root. Arresting the person is not the root of the problem. It's like the last quarter on a footy game, because he's got all these things that are going wrong in the first quarter, second quarter. Poverty, homelessness, stealing. In the last quarter, he's arrested, he's thrown into jail. I don't see any fundings into those preventative measures that we need. We need services out there to keep people on the straight and narrow, but instead we're funding the end of it. Like the people are just getting arrested and thrown into jail without a clear pathway out of it. The budget in the education and trainings, sector, it does not deliver for student families or teachers in the communities. It maintains an existing, so everything that's in existing settings, it's still in that pathway. There's nothing, for our remote communities, we need extra. We've got the worst chronic illness, we've got the worst homelessness, we've got the overcrowding issues. We need to throw extra money at these services, at these little sectors of the community, so that, it doesn't compound. It doesn't compound so that people are jumping on cars, jumping on planes, coming in with their family and spreading out into the car parks, into the bus, and making everyone unsafe. If we could look at just funding some of these little aspects in the community, little services in these communities, especially big communities like Manangrita, Port Keats, Bathurst Island, Warrimyanga, we'd definitely, like, if there was MVR out there, if there was specialised health clinic, that's what keeps people in their community. They'll only come in to do, for the show, which is coming up. They'll only come in for that and then go back home. More investment is needed in early education, skills and training pathways. The budget has ignored calls from the education and training sector on where to invest. Now, I still haven't looked through this, and I'll save majority of my contribution for the budget reply, but it doesn't look like some of these sectors are being funded to their full capacity. Early years service has been given less than 2%. Early years services has been given less than 2% of the education budget. The numbers of Territory children attending preschool has worsened. Number of Aboriginal children attending preschool has worsened. The NT is the only jurisdiction that we're going backwards in terms of meeting closing the gap target. I think the member for Johnston said that yesterday. CLP has cut funding towards the continued implementation of preschool reform agreement. The budget fails to relieve any burden on our education system, especially in our remote communities. So that the better, fairer school budget is being used for outside of the classroom, getting people to swimming places. Should be used for resourcing classrooms, books, getting extra TA, teacher's assistant. But I've heard that they've been using some of that to get some of their swimming classes, where some of these communities, we need more than $200 for them to jump in a swimming pool to get that training from, people like Minjalang. They got to go down to...
Standing Order 1, the conversations are happening across the Parliament, not through the Chair.
Yeah, I agree. Can we also stop the interjection and let the member for Arafura be heard in silence?
Thank you. That's not enough, $200 per child in remote places, especially isolated like Warri and Minjalang. And look, I'm more than happy to talk to the Education Minister on how we can get that happening, to get them into major hubs to get that swimming lesson happening. No investment in remote housing for teachers. So we know that the schools are increasing in class sizes and there's more TA, teachers' assistants. I mean, teachers' assistants come from the community anyway, but people going into communities need adequate housing to teach. Training. No new CLP investment in budget to support apprenticeships and traineeships. They have failed to strengthen partnerships between school training providers and industry. And I've spoken to CDU about the CDU hub out at Catherine. And look, credit where credit's due. They've got the inmates in there that used it to clean up Catherine, and they're going through vet courses in the near future. So I had that chat with them. Expanding access to VET, school-based apprenticeship regardless of location, so that online learning needs to be invested in. Supporting cultural responsiveness pathways for Aboriginal students that align with community priorities and local economic opportunities. Now I'm just going to have a little stakeholder feedback from anti-costs, which were not which were unflattened by the budget. Sector analysis on today's budget found key shortcomings in relation to housing, early supports for children and family, education, healthcare, mental health, and alcohol and other drugs, youth services, and addressing the domestic violence and sexual violence crisis. We are seeing rehabilitation investments in jail, but nowhere near in the community. It's about keeping kids in school, more youth engagement programs around the regions, like the Shack in Darwin, and investing in youth transition housing mode. Every Territory child and family, no matter where they live, no matter where it's remote or urban, must be supported to access early education and care that's right for them, culturally appropriate as well. Every young person needs access to right training and skills and development and pathways. Now, this is a good one for my community of Mananguita. There's a lot of potential there, but hopefully there's going to be some training for the young ones, for the teenagers that are coming up, to give them something to do. Every Territory educator deserves to be safe and supported at work. Teachers, support staff, principals, specialist staff, all the volunteers are the backbone of our education system. They ensure our kids get the best out of schooling and set them up for life with the ability to gain and keep employment to be productive members of society. Again, in closing, this budget does not seem to allocate, prioritize our regions and remote, and as a result, to get our gain services or access services, they'll be coming into Darwin, for dialysis, for chronic illness, for health, for jobs, for MVR, and they'll be out in the streets, and there's a pub everywhere. So that's where the social problems happen. Just want the government to invest in the bush and the regional centres. Thank you.
Yes, sorry. I'm just getting some communication on speakers, that's all. Sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. And Mr. Deputy Speaker, I move that the motion be amended by omitting all the words after that this Assembly and inserting condemns the Labor Party for its legacy of debt, delay and decline, and for leaving the CLP government to clean up the mess, to restore fiscal discipline, rebuild the economy, and deliver the practical relief, infrastructure and jobs Territorians deserve. And I will speak to the amended motion, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Mr. Deputy Speaker, the Leader of the Opposition, after their loss at the recent election, actually admitted to Territorians that they felt let down by the former Labor government, and I think that's pretty clear to see, Mr. Deputy Speaker. And Territorians made that crystal clear when they overwhelmingly voted for change in 2024. And while Labor was in power, we've seen constant leadership turmoil, internal infighting, and a government distracted, and of course then responsibility abandoned. Mr. Deputy Speaker, they left behind a weakened economy, shattered trust, and a budget black hole with no credible plan to fix it. And of course, Territorians cannot see a way out of that. And I think the member for Fong covered that very well in his contribution earlier this afternoon. And let's not forget, all this happened while the Leader of the Opposition sat at the cabinet table as one of Labor's most senior figures. She wasn't a bystander in this, Mr Deputy Speaker. She was part of that failure. And Labor promised us a $40 billion economy by 2030. But what they delivered was a phantom pipeline, or, as has been discussed here this afternoon, more a pipe dream, and an economy weighed down by debt and years of mismanagement. Their plans, Mr Deputy Speaker, and their big projects either failed completely or were left on a program with no funding and no plans for delivery. And who can forget some of those projects, Mr Deputy Speaker? There was a water bottling plant. Lots of territory money invested into that sort of disappeared. Where did that go? Amphibious aircraft. Signs on rockets. That was a cracker. Boundless possible. And then, of course, we had the prawn farm. There was significant investment in that. We've got a great road. It doesn't sort of go anywhere at the moment, but the pastoralists out in that area are pretty happy with it. They reckon it's great. And one of the projects that we're dealing with now, but we're actually fixing, is the shiplift project. And we know that started as a $100 million commitment from us, from the CLP back in the day, capped. It was supposed to be private investment that then took that on and developed it. Well, Labor took that project and God knows what they did with it. But we're now dealing with that outcome, Mr Deputy Speaker. What started off as 400 million became 800 and 20 million, which has now become 850 million. And we know from the work done by the Public Accounts Committee what they found. No business cases done by the previous government. Where in the world would anybody, any government or any private company, invest that sort of money without a business case? And I think the Leader of the Opposition said sometime today that there was no business cases provided for the new prison work that we're doing, for the new work camps, for the new and the planning for the new men's and women's prison. I can tell you now, Mr Deputy Speaker, we've done the work. There is a business plan, there is a business case, and it's been very, very well looked at prior to making any decisions. Unlike what seems to happen with those on the other side, they come up with an idea, oh, we'll go and do that, throw a pile of cash at it and hope for the best. Well, we've seen how that has worked for the Territory, Mr Deputy Speaker. But back to the shiplift, we will continue to develop the shiplift. It will become a significant piece of economic infrastructure for the Northern Territory. And as the Public Accounts Committee found, we can't step away from it. If we did, we'd be throwing $600 million away, and we won't do that. We won't be wasteful in that respect, Mr Deputy Speaker. We'll continue on with the project. We will deliver it, and we will make it a showcase for the Northern Territory as part of that larger Northern Marines precinct, because that's where the previous government was short-sighted. We'll build a shiplift, and all the sign-offs, I think we got the information from the Paech, the sign-offs and those decision points all seem to happen just weeks before the close-down period for an election. It's funny that, Mr Deputy Speaker, so just before an election, decisions are made, there's commitments done, no business cases, and we'll continue on our merry way, and we now pay the price. But that's where the short-sightedness was, Mr Deputy Speaker. There was no planning apart from just the shiplift. The shiplift is a piece of infrastructure, but it needs the enabling infrastructure alongside it to help it develop and grow, and that is where the Marine Precinct will work. You need the workshops, the sheds, you need the tradies and that maritime service expertise that once a vessel is taken out of the water, there's someone there to actually fix it and some place to actually do that work. But also in this now, the planning that we've done through the Marine Precinct is to provide additional area for that littoral capacity, that barge capacity, and that will be key not just for shipping but also for defence longer term. So that is just on the shiplift. Now I'll move on to the infrastructure program. Now the Leader of the Opposition said there was no pipeline and was talking about cuts. But I'll go back to the one salient point, Mr Deputy Speaker. You can't cut something that wasn't funded. And what Labor were doing, it was just announcement after announcement after announcement in that infrastructure program. I think we used to get it every week in the 4 years that we were in opposition. Every week there'd be a new infrastructure announcement and something stuck on the program. But they were never funded properly, Mr Deputy Speaker. And that's the key here. We've got a $4.2 billion infrastructure program, and we've funded it to $2.7 billion with cash this year. Now, when we came into government, I specifically remember the infrastructure program and this huge unwieldy thing that it was, with all these rats and mice projects on it that were all these announcements, these press releases from the previous government, and we had to tidy that up. But there was a huge amount, it was 4.7 or 4.8 billion, if I remember correctly, Mr Deputy Speaker, on their program. And when we come into government, their budget had $300 million in cash to deliver on that program. $300 million. That would have delivered the last parts of the Tiger Brennan overpass and the Mandurah marine facility across the ways there. That's all that $300 million would have delivered, Mr Deputy Speaker, and that's without the rest of the stuff they had on the program. But what we've done, we cleaned up that program, so the stuff that is on there is deliverable. It is stuff that we can get out the door over time for the benefit of Territorians, and we've cashed it appropriately to make sure that we can deliver that stuff. Now, it's not to say that some of those projects that we knocked off are gone forever. They still sit there on a spreadsheet, and as we can afford to, and this is the key point, Mr Deputy Speaker, is as we can afford to do this, we will bring those projects back. Because there's no point having a pipeline of fallacy that is sending the wrong signals to the marketplace. Okay? You can put $10 billion worth of stuff on a program and the marketplace is sitting there going, oh, geez, they're going to deliver all this sort of stuff. But they're actually not. You can only deliver what you can cash. So what we have on our program is realistic. It is what is actually deliverable. And that is quite key. And I picked up on one of the comments and the statements from the Leader of the Opposition that budget paper 4 was really, really skinny. There was not much in it. Well, we actually went and done some checking, Madam Deputy Speaker. The Labor's budget paper 4 was 37 pages. Ours is 33 or 34, so there's only a few pages difference. So to say it's considerably skinny, I don't think that's quite right, because there's not much difference. We might have had a few less pictures in ours and maybe a little bit less waffle at the front and the back, but the content inside that book is still the same, Madam Deputy Speaker, and that's key. And I'll always say that we will always put forward a program that we can deliver. We're not going to send the wrong signals to the marketplace. But let's talk about debt. When we came to government, debt was increasing and spiralling out of control, and the debt per capita was absolutely horrendous. And it's still not that good, Madam Deputy Speaker. But let's look at where the debt was going. Debt under Labor in the last 4 years of their government was increasing 22% per annum. That's staggering figures, 22% per annum. We've done the hard work, and as my colleague, the member for Fong Lim, has said, this budget shows that that hard work is paying off, because that debt growth has changed from 22% per annum to 4% per annum. That's an 18% reduction in debt increase. And it is a big ship or a barge to turn around, because you can't just pull the plug and stop spending, because we would send our economy spiralling out of control and send the territory backwards into oblivion. That's something that we will not do, Madam Deputy Speaker. So we're doing the hard work. We're pulling that debt back, and we're seeing it flatten out over the next 2 years, and then we finally start to see a reduction. And the member for Fong spoke about state final demand and what those numbers are. And I'm happy to stand here and explain it for those who don't quite understand. Yes, we've seen a slight reduction in this budget that we're delivering now, and we see a 0.08% reduction in the following financial year. But that has to be taken into context, Madam Deputy Speaker, because it comes off the back of the work done by Santos on Barossa. When we see a lot of construction work taking place, we see an increase in our state final demand. And that's reflected in those numbers. Now, Barossa is now finished construction and then moving into delivery. And as these things happen, we see a drop away in our state final demand. This happened after INPEX, and it was a very significant drop then. And it's these bigger projects have a greater effect on a smaller economy like ours. So yes, we do see a reduction in state final demand, and it's there, it's clear and open in our budget. But what we do see as we move forward is that significant increase in our state final demand, which then starts to outpace the rest of the nation. And that's somewhere where we want to go. Now, if we can get a few things done during this next budget cycle and the one after, we may see an uptick in that state final demand, and we certainly hope that we do. And we'll be doing the work to make sure that that happens. Because we're doing the things to restore fiscal discipline, Madam Deputy Speaker. We're doing that hard work to rebuild our economy and deliver practical relief. And for those opposite to stand there and say that there is no relief for families in the Territory is just absolutely and flatly wrong. $270 million in this budget for cost of living relief for Territorians. They are big numbers. And it's a $57 million increase. And as I said in one of my contributions during question time, a lot of that comes from the increase in costs to generate power through no fault of the Territories. Again, those weather events have caused us issues, and we've lost gas supply from E&I. So the cost of generation has gone up. We have had to buy and source gas from elsewhere, and I'm glad that we've been able to do that, and we've had partners in industry who work with us to do it. But it comes at a cost, Madam Deputy Speaker. We're having to buy gas at a higher price, which then costs more to generate the power to keep the lights on right across the Territory. So rather than passing those costs of generation on to mums and dads, Territory taxpayers, we're subsidising through the community service order those price increases. And it's over $2,000 per household. So if that's not real cost of living relief, Madam Deputy Speaker, I really don't know what is. I don't know what else those opposite actually expect. And just along with those power prices, I think it's been spoken about ad nauseum today. Back to school vouchers, learn to swim vouchers, free swimming lessons, vouchers for our seniors, the removal of the requirement for regio inspections, which puts a few extra dollars in everybody's pocket, our contribution to the reduction in fuel excise, which is a 5.7 cent per litre reduction, a cost of the Territory of over $19 million. These are real outcomes for Territorians, Madam Deputy Speaker. So, in closing, I won't take financial advice from those opposite the chamber. I've seen what they did when they were in charge of the finances over 8 years, and now we're doing the work to fix those issues that they've left behind for us. It's not easy, Madam Deputy Speaker. It's hard work to try and turn that around. But we have to turn around, because if we don't, the Territory will end up in a very, very bad fiscal situation. And I look at some of the other states and territories and the fiscal situation that they see themselves in, and some of them are quite dire and, of course, don't allow them the flexibility to do the things that they need to do to support their constituents. We're lucky, because of the discipline we've shown last year and this year, that when the floods hit, we were in a position to be able to make those quick decisions, to roll $130 million out the door to support the people of the Territory who've been affected by floods and weather events, to deal with those infrastructure issues, to start doing those repairs on the roads. Because if we were like some of those other states and had continued on our borrowing and had huge debt positions, we might not have been so lucky to be able to immediately make that decision and roll that support straight out the door to help people who desperately needed that help. So that's why we're doing the hard work, Madam Deputy Speaker. We know that those opposite didn't do the hard work. All they were interested in is borrowing more money and spending more money because they seemed to think that just borrowing and spending was going to solve the problem. It didn't solve a problem, Madam Deputy Speaker. I tell you what, it's created a hell of a problem that is going to take decades to deal with. You can't just walk in and start paying back $13 billion worth of debt overnight. But the work has started. We're seeing a reduction in our debt through tight fiscal management. And we're seeing an increase in our own source revenue. We're doing everything we can to support business to grow our own source revenue and to make more money for Territorians. So we get into that position where we're not having to borrow to pay the wages and do the day-to-day stuff. And this year was the first time in many years that we haven't had to borrow money to pay public sector wages. Sadly, we're going to have to do that in the upcoming budget, but then in the out years after that, we're going to be in a much better position. We need to get the debt under control. We need to grow our own source revenue so that the Territory has the flexibility to do those nice-to-do things. And I think I explained it today doing some work with the press. Is if you apply it to your home budget, you've maxed out your credit card, but your wages are only this. Well, you've got to forgo some things to be able to pay back that credit card. And once you've paid back the credit card and you've still got your wages, then you can afford to start doing the things that you might like to do, the going out for dinner, the new pair of shoes or things like that. That's very, really simplistic terms, but it still applies to a budget for a government. You cannot spend beyond your means because if you do, you'll get to a point in time where it will catch up with you and you won't be able to do the things that you would like to do and need to do for the people that you represent. So again, I won't take advice from the Leader of the Opposition on finances. I've seen what the Opposition did with our finances over 8 years. I'm very proud of the work that we've done over the last 2 years and what we've delivered yesterday. And I'm certainly looking forward to doing more of that hard work over the next few years to deliver better outcomes for Territorians and put us in a far better position economically so that our kids and our grandkids have a place that they want to stay in, that is growing and, of course, is safe, we restore the lifestyle that we all love that has been eroded away over time. And that's something that I am working towards, and it is absolutely worth working towards, Madam Deputy Speaker. Thank you.
Honourable members, before calling the next member in the debate, I note the Assembly is now considering both the Member for Arnhem's motion and the Minister's amendment. When no more members rise to speak, I will put the question on the amendment. I will then call for any other members who have not spoken to the motion and then the Member for Arnhem in reply. Member for Karama.
Thank you, Acting Deputy Speaker. And look, can I say I'll be fairly short and concise, but I think it's important that I take the opportunity. And just as a prelude to my speech, I seek leave to table some crime statistics and also some official signage from the Department of Housing, if that's okay.
No. Aye.
All right.
Someone says no, you can't table it.
Yep. That's true. So they don't want to see the crime stats. This is absolutely pettiness at its best. I wanted to quote some facts, year-on-year stats, but no, they don't want that to happen. So that tells us a lot about this rabble of an opposition, may I say. Rabble of an opposition, absolutely. So let me say, I have to praise the Leader of the Opposition, not the member for Gwoja who was very petty then, Madam Speaker, or Acting Deputy Speaker. I have to praise the Leader of the Opposition and a party for consistency, for absolute consistency. Both in her budget reply this morning and the speeches this afternoon, they have consistently confirmed that they live in an alternative universe devoid of reality, And I'm probably going to echo a lot of sentiments that was already been done by the member Fong Lim and the Treasurer, because we probably all have the same sentiment when we hear this rubbish. Now, to help me do that, let me put on some rose-coloured glasses. Rose-coloured glasses. To quote some of the musings we heard from the Labor opposition today. The Leader of the Opposition stated very clearly that she said she believes our budget contains no plan, no vision, no future. She also went on to say it was a missed opportunity. I say again, a missed opportunity. And she also claimed that hearing about all the issues of concerns from Territorians who have apparently been failed by the CLP when she's walked up the track. And Madam Speaker, many members on this side observed this morning these claims were heard in total silence by this Assembly, without a single chant of solidarity by our parliamentary colleagues. Their silence is very telling, because they don't believe what they're hearing either. So, Acting Deputy Speaker, let me respond to these consistent yet totally flawed claims by taking off these rose-coloured glasses and wear a pair of forged in reality and common sense. Reality and common sense. Acting Deputy Speaker, we will not be lectured on missed opportunity by a former minister in a failed Labor government that oversaw an escalation in crime, destruction of our economy and a significant reduction in our lifestyle. And may I say, I can't even table some facts to prove that, because they're scared of them. They're scared, they're weak. They just can't face the facts. We will not be lectured on how to budget the spend of Territorians' money by a rabble opposition who, when in government, acted like the emperor with no clothes by rolling out a list of phantom projects with no funded provided, or worse, spent money on roads to nowhere for projects like Project Sea Dragon, or by the same rabble Labor opposition who contractually committed Territorians to fundings over $800 million to a shiplift project without ever having a business case that justifies such an investment. Never had a business case. Shame and a half. And, Acting Deputy Speaker, how could we forget the building of a shade structure with one minor fault that it didn't provide shade. Just a simple little fault, but that's okay. And I think we heard the same phrase again too. We will not be lectured by a Leader of the Opposition who claims our budget is underwhelming, and wants to return to the Labor days of spend on thought bubble projects with their only business case being, oh, these might generate a media opportunity with zero fiscal responsibility. Shame, shame, shame. Acting Deputy Speaker, why I wasn't allowed to table the crime documents, I will read from them. And I think this is very good, because let's understand law and order is a key focus of our budget. It is a key focus for our community, and they want to know that we are going to continue the path we've started. We have made some initial gains, but we've got a lot more work to do. But let's just quote the stats. Comparing the 12 months ending February 2026 with the 12 months ending February 2025. Let's just go to Darwin, because that also includes my electorate. Total offences are down 13%. Total offences against the person are down 12%. Assault offences are down 13%. Robbery offences are down 15%. Total property offences are down 14%. Burglary, dwelling, house break-ins offences are down 47%. Burglary, non-residential, commercial break-ins offences down 43%. Motor vehicle theft and related offences are down 27%, and other theft, except for motor vehicle offences, are down 15%. So don't tell me we haven't started on the right path. We have, but we've got to keep going. We admit there's a lot more work to do, and that's why we are investing more in this budget to keep that path going. Now, we also had a debate about part of the security of neighbourhoods and so on, and certainly in my electorate, and I have mentioned before, is public housing. With certain public housing tenancies, I say again, 95% of public housing is fantastic, and I'm a big supporter of public housing per se. But there is a certain group that have been destroying our neighbourhood. And I'll say it again, and I've said it many times. I know the Labor opposition don't agree with me. Certainly I believe the member for Johnston doesn't agree with me, but I'm going to say this again. Public housing is a privilege, not a right. Public housing is a privilege, not a right. And these are public assets. And then I have the member for Daly coming out to me because he refers back to a time when I was quoting the density of housing, and that was the issue I was talking about, the over-density of housing. And he has the temerity to say I've breached privacy. Well, I'm sorry, I was allowed to say that speech, and I did say that speech, and the Speaker agreed I was allowed to say the speech, but to say I breached privacy, because another thing they don't want me to pull out is show you the public signage by the Department of Housing on their housing complexes. And it has a big sign up there, public housing property, no trespassing, and it's got it right on the units. So don't tell me this is private, it's public knowledge. Everyone going past there says, hang on, that's a public housing property. You could probably deduce that people living there are public housing tenants, and that's good. Most of them are fantastic. I'm not belittling all the tenants. I'm just saying the identification of public housing, it's public assets, it's not a problem at all. And if you drive down the streets in Karama and Malak, you can tell very quickly a lot of the houses, some are kept in good nick, but others will obviously come out, and it's pretty obvious, and everyone knows they are public housing where we've failed at the moment because there's been no consequences. No consequences. And may I say, I'm happy to go out to my electorate and I'm happy to show and tell people what I've done. And the speech I gave previously, I will put that on the Facebook. I'm proud of it. I'll stand up for it. And I'd love to actually maybe put up the member of Daly's response too in uninterrupted, total contrast and say, here's a choice with the CLP. We recognise neighbourhoods. We want to improve the security of neighbourhoods. We are absolutely out there to defend you. But on the flip side, oh, no, you can't do anything like that. You can't enforce consequences. Go back to the Labor Party policies. Well, the Labor Party policies degenerated us into this whole mess. The biggest issue we've got, and they don't like us saying it, is we've had to fix the mess from the last 8 years. Now, yes, it is our problem. We have to do it. But this mess was generated from 8 years of inept government, total neglect. They destroyed our economy, they escalated crime, and they destroyed our lifestyle. So on that note, all I can say is I'm absolutely against the proposal by the Leader of the Opposition. I do support the amendment, and I thank you for hearing me.
Member for Gwoja, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And just given how hot that was and the member for Karama nearly blowing his lid, I'm going to keep this quiet and respectful. I certainly want to acknowledge the Treasurer delivering his second budget. Of course, it's a mammoth task. Of course, it's complex. Sitting around that cabinet table and trying to advocate for your portfolio areas, the investment that you want, the competing priorities and challenges is a difficult job. I absolutely understand and acknowledge that. I've been around that table myself. The Treasurer has done so. He's delivered the government's budget. I accept and acknowledge that the government are in power. This is their budget. We're the opposition. We have a differing view on a number of areas in that. Nevertheless, we are here today discussing what's in the territory budget, and we think that there could be some other areas of investment or reform. I want to acknowledge that the member for Fong Lim spoke at length around a series of investments or areas that could be considered. And certainly I don't disagree with things that he has said, but I do think that some of those do need to be challenged along the way. Madam Acting Deputy Speaker, I think every Territory government is always faced with the legacy issues that we have inherited over many years since self-government. That's not saying that there is not work to be done. Of course, work needs to be done. Of course, governments need to be fiscally responsible and take into consideration those decisions around financial management, good debt versus bad debt and what that means, are incredibly important. But I know that there are a number of ministers who have portfolios that are incredibly challenging. I acknowledge that the roads portfolio and the housing portfolio are really difficult areas. Now, the Territory government, Madam Acting Deputy Speaker, is around 70% funded through Commonwealth government grants. So in plain English, that means for every $10 coming in, $7 is Commonwealth money, $3 is Territory government, whether that's through taxes, whether that's through areas of charges, or whether that's through royalties and investment. So certainly growing the Territory's own source revenue is incredibly important, and it's important for the government, it's important for the opposition, it's important for all of us to look at how do we grow that slice of the pie so that we can have money coming into the Territory that we're able to spend, and that's not tied to particular grant agreements or particular areas, Madam Acting Deputy Speaker. I think that is important. I think when we talk about it, there is good debt and there is bad debt. And certainly I want to acknowledge that good debt is often around stimulating and growing the economy and being able to deliver assets that return investment to the Northern Territory, in turn grow our own source revenue and the ability to reinvest that money into other areas of the Territory's economy. I think that there are some real key areas that we could be seeing that investment in. One of those, of course, was to do that with State Square Gallery, so that eventually it would be a premier arts facility in the Territory that would attract visitors every year, because one of the things we need to do in the Territory is grow our tourism experiences, because more flights, more people, more life, more money comes into the Northern Territory when we really grow that tourism space. And I think that's incredibly important. I think we need to keep an eye on that, and we need to look at the investments, and certainly we'll get the opportunity to talk about that when it comes up in estimates. I also want to acknowledge, Madam Speaker, that the arts does inject over $750 million into the Territory economy each and every year. That's an amazing investment, and we certainly want to see more of that coming in. I think, Madam Acting Deputy Speaker, as well, as I said previously, the Territory has always had legacy issues around ageing infrastructure, around the need for investment. The Territory is like no other jurisdiction. We have a small population scattered right across each and every corner of the Northern Territory. It does make it hard. It is expensive to deliver services across the Territory. And I think that's really important, Madam Speaker, to take into consideration. I know it was a challenge for the previous CLP government when they were in government. Fortunately for them, they were able to make that bottom line look better heading into that 2016 election, because they did sell off TIO and the Port of Darwin, which gave them a short-term sugar hit to fix up the bottom line of the budget. But what it didn't do was fix the structural issues around the Territory's budget constraints and financial management. Now, that's going to be an issue for this government, it's going to be an issue for future governments, it's going to be an issue for everyone in the Territory, and we need to look at that. We also need to look at creating a participatory economy in the regions, Madam Speaker. Now, one of the things I often see as a bush member, and I know that members of my parliamentary team here on both sides will see as well, you can be on a pastoral property, Madam Speaker, and it would have recently sold for $38 million or $56 million, and right across the fence on the other side is land that we're not seeing the value of. We need to work with Aboriginal Territorians to unlock the future prosperity of the Northern Territory, whether that is looking at environmental practices, whether that's looking at working with Aboriginal communities to unlock the potential in the bush. It's incredibly important because the bush holds a number of successes to the Territory's future, and we all need to be working through that and understanding what that looks like and how that can work. And that's got to be led in partnership with Aboriginal people working with the Territory and the Commonwealth to look at that area and look at that space, Madam Speaker, because that is going to truly be absolutely integral to the future prosperity of the Territory's economic management and our ability to look at these things. Madam Speaker, we've had a position for a little while now as well. The Territory doesn't have currently a price on water. That's an additional $30 to $40 million a year that could be coming into the Northern Territory government to invest in areas that matter. So currently we need to have a conversation around what a price on water looks like and how it works for mining and resource companies, because, Madam Speaker, water is such a precious, finite resource, but it's also an economic generator if there is a price on it. Imagine having extra $30 to $40 million coming into the Territory every year that the Treasurer, the CLP member for Namatjira-Bilyead, could invest in growing businesses, could invest in building more critical infrastructure across the Northern Territory. It could be important. It could absolutely be, and it could be set at a competitive rate that does not deter people from parking in the Territory and doing business in the Territory, because people are already making significant profits from Territory resources. It's an area that I encourage the government to consider, to look at. It is important, and we do need to see that potential investment in that area. Again, Madam Speaker, there are things that we would do different. We're on the opposition, the government are in power. I'm not here to argue today. The government have put forward their budget. There are areas that we will ask questions on in estimates. But, you know, I think when we do look at it, one of the critical areas that is absolutely imperative to invest in is areas of life and death. And our health system in the Territory is an area that we should never be cutting corners or cutting the budget on, because it delivers important services to people in the Northern Territory. I know that there are many people who have raised some concerns and disappointment around the Territory government's budget when it comes to health, around the things that they would have liked to have seen more of, more investment in particular areas. And again, Madam Acting Deputy Speaker, I think that we need to step that through carefully and considerately and see what that looks like. It is disappointing that the government haven't invested more money, as the member for Mulka raised, in law and justice groups, a great initiative to allow Aboriginal elders to sit with the judge at the time of sentencing, to consider options to look at peacekeeping and mediating, and certainly alternatives to custody. We've seen firsthand that they work. The evidence is absolutely clear that they work. It is disappointing that we couldn't see those initiatives being funded in a more appropriate manner, I should say, Madam Acting Deputy Speaker. Again, certainly want to look at where we can increase that. I don't always agree, again, as I've said, with the member for Fong Lim, but I'm not an economist, Madam Acting Deputy Speaker. I'm not going to pretend to be one. I think that certainly the key to the Territory is population growth. It is important. We do need it. More people, more money, people spending in the Territory, incredibly important. But I think we do need to look at as well, Madam Acting Deputy Speaker, not all debt is bad debt. Some debt is important because it enables us to stimulate the economy. It enables us to ensure that we are building important critical infrastructure for future generations in the Northern Territory. I've been talking to people out bush around the budget, and, people do say, Madam Speaker, you don't sell your house to pay off your mortgage because then you're homeless. So I think we do need to have a conversation. Not all debt is bad debt. Again, this is the Treasurer's second budget. He's survived his first budget. He's delivered his second budget. We'll have the opportunity to really flesh that out and ask the questions in estimates. I think it is important. I think, as I've said, we do have a very unique landscape in the Territory where we are rich in minerals and natural resources, and yes, we should be celebrating that. Yes, we need to have safeguards and protections for the environment and for vulnerable people in the community, and yes, we do need to deliver and continue to deliver critical infrastructure and grow our own source revenue. I'm not disagreeing with that. I think that certainly there are things in this parliament that we can all agree on. I think that's one of them. How do we grow the Territory's slice of the pie that the Territory has absolute autonomy and control on how we can spend that? And again, I acknowledge that different governments of the day have different priorities. I accept that. Your priorities you've made clear in your budget. We'll speak to our priorities in our reply to the budget that's been tabled this week. I don't think this is something that we should just be, throwing mud across the chamber. I've listened to the Treasurer. I think I've listened to the member for Barclay has spoken, and the member for Fong Lim. There are aspects of what you've said tonight that I don't agree with, and there are parts of it that I do agree with. So, look, I think as years goes on, you will have different mechanisms around how you want to manage the budget. Was I happy with everything that we did when we were in government? I'd be lying to you if I said I was. No, and I think that there's some of you over there that probably are not happy you didn't get what you wanted up in the budget. That's just the nature of doing a Territory budget. You can't get everything that you want, and you do need to take time. There are a number of projects I would have liked to have done, but I had the previous Treasurer telling me I couldn't do it as well. So, look, Madam Speaker, I am thankful for the ability to respond to this tonight. I think it is an incredible challenge for whoever is in government to manage that. It's hard when you're out on the doors, or if you're in the bush, out in communities or talking to businesses, because people will always tell you that there is investment that's needed across multiple areas and industries in the Territory, and it's hard to manage those. But I think we can't lose focus that everything that we do in this place needs to be about stimulating and growing the economy, because, growing the economy means jobs. Growing the economy means more money coming into the Territory to grow the investment so that we can continue to look at things like building new hospitals, of which I think a great spot for a new Darwin hospital is the Birrama Barracks site. It's in between Darwin and Palmerston, and it's next to the airport. So maybe we can hit up the Commonwealth for that piece of land and get it for free. Member for Catherine's agreeing with me, I think. I know I'm a bit scared. It's really quiet in the chamber right now. I don't know if I'm saying the right thing. But Madam Speaker, I think it is important. Like I said, I'm not an economist. I do care about the Territory. I do care about Territory jobs. I want to grow Territory jobs. I want to grow important social infrastructure and economic infrastructure. But I think the future of the Northern Territory needs to ensure that every single person in the Territory is empowered both socially and economically to be included in the economy so that we can grow it. I don't want to see particular regions of the Territory left behind. People often talk about places outside of Darwin not particularly being economic generators, and I just want to put that to bed tonight. I think it is 7 of the next major projects when it comes to natural resources and minerals are in the regions. The regions are what powers the Northern Territory, Madam Acting Deputy Speaker. Whether it's one of the gold mines, whether it is, the natural resources, whether it's places like Arafura down in Central Australia, phosphates. They are rare earths. I think the member for Port Darwin spoke about rare earth minerals earlier today. All of these projects are in the regions, and I think that's incredibly important. I think we should also look at having a conversation at some point. I know my bush colleagues will probably agree with me here, but it'd be great to see something like royalties for regions in the future, keeping a portion of that investment in the region where it came from, because certainly a lot of these projects that keep the Territory's own source revenue going come from those regions. So I think it is important. That's not to say that economic opportunities don't come from Tennant Creek, Palmerston, Darwin, Katherine and Alice Springs, but the bush is a significant generator and it holds up the Territory. So I think that is important. Of course, really wanting to work with anyone who's interested in growing jobs in the bush, because that's important too, for a few reasons. One, it's important for families to have a strong, secure, stable income. They also pay income tax, so of course we get to see that economic opportunity growing and developing there. Absolutely welcome any conversation around, a migration strategy that is absolutely going to grow the Territory's population. I think that's important. If you look at projections that were done 20 years ago, places like Alice Springs were flagged to have, 40 to 50,000 people by now, Madam Speaker. So we've got to look at how we can grow the investment in the regions. It is important. I do acknowledge that. Again, I'm very keen to have those conversations. I think that there is a number of areas where we can look at increasing the economic opportunity in the Territory. I really encourage the government to work with the Territory's 4 land councils around working with Aboriginal people to have a participatory economy to grow those regions. I think there's lots of agricultural opportunity as well for our pastoralists to work with remote Aboriginal communities and traditional owners to look at what the opportunities are there as well. I acknowledge that the pastoral industry is an important industry in the Territory, and one that, I'm pretty proud to have spent time over the years getting out and talking and hearing from them firsthand. But there will be alternative industries that might come and knock on the Territory's door. We saw over COVID the aviation centre in Alice Springs, which was the largest at the time. I want to thank you all for the opportunity to speak. I look forward to having this conversation with members. I do thank the member for Casuarina who was looking to give me an extension of time. That's okay. I'm going to... No, it's all good. I think... I just want to thank everyone. I think it's an important conversation. Look, I look forward to estimates. I look forward to all working with everyone around how we can grow our own source revenue, but it can't come at the cost of the Territory's environment, and it can't come at the cost of the Northern Territory's, cultural importance and significance, sacred sites, places that are really important to everyone. It's important. I think there's lots of conversations going on at a federal level around the Port of Darwin. It should have never been sold off. I think the federal government are looking at that. Let's see what that brings in. There's lots of opportunities here in the Territory. We all know we're in Parliament. We know it's the land of opportunity. Thank you.
Member for Fannie Bay.
Thank you, Acting Deputy Speaker. I rise today to respond to what can only be described as a breathtakingly audacious motion from the Leader of the Opposition. I'd like to thank the member for Gwoja for his calm and considered speech, but it seems that the Opposition Leader has nothing else to do. It seems she looks at her job description and reads, no matter whether something is good or bad, whether it's what the majority of Territorians wanted and what they've asked for, always work to belittle, manipulate and destroy everything that the CLP does as a government, even if that includes misleading Territorians in attempt to get more votes at the next election. But Acting Deputy Speaker, the reason I call this an audacious motion is that the motion It's a motion that attempts to rewrite history, ignore reality and distract Territorians from the very record they themselves created. But let's be honest, this budget is not lacking vision. It's exposing their ongoing lack of vision. And now, Mr. Deputy Speaker, they want to stand up as the moral authority on economic competence. It is astonishing that those opposite would come into this chamber after more than 20 of the last 26 years in government and somehow lecture this side about economic management, infrastructure delivery and the cost of living. It would be funny, Mr. Deputy Speaker, if it wasn't so insulting to Territorians. So let's be clear from the outset. This motion is not about the future of the Northern Territory. It's about the opposition desperately trying to escape their past. But Mr. Deputy Speaker, I know that Territorians remember. They remember who was in charge. They remember who let Territorians down. They remember the debt. They remember the drift. And they remember the missed opportunities that left our economy fragile and our communities doing it tough. And now, after 2 decades of complete and utter mismanagement, that same party has the absolute gall to come into this chamber and lecture this government about an economic vision. Mr. Deputy Speaker, that really does take some nerve. The people in Fannie Bay, Parap, The Gardens, Ludmilla and Coconut Grove do not need lectures from a party that presided over those years of drift. They need roads, they need services, safe neighbourhoods and a government that gets things done. So let's just talk about the cost of living, because those opposite claim that we have completely failed Territorians. When those opposite stand up and say there is no real cost of living relief, they're not just wrong, they're deliberately misleading the public. Or maybe they just haven't read the budget books at all. The Leader of the Opposition talks a lot about cost of living, which is funny because the opposition failed to mention the cost of living in Labor's last budget in 2024. There were no new cost of living measures announced under Labor, despite presiding for 8 years. The skyrocketing increases to car and home insurance and rent, to name a few things. But in contrast, Mr. Deputy Speaker, immediately on coming to government, the CLP delivered on our promises, rolling out a new suite of cost of living measures. And Mr. Deputy Speaker, relief does not have to be reckless and real to be real. Relief does not have to be a one-off sugar hit to matter. Relief has to be targeted, responsible and sustainable, and this is what this government has delivered. The opposition wants to pretend that the Territory's challenges began when they left office. They did not. Those challenges have been years in the making, and they're because of ongoing delays, poor discipline and an addiction to announcing plans without the capability, the courage or the competence to deliver them. They were baked in over years of poor economic stewardship, years where spending was not matched with sustainable growth, years where tough decisions were avoided and the structural problems were kicked down the road. This budget confronts those realities head on. It delivers targeted, responsible relief, not reckless sugar-hit spending designed for headlines rather than households. It focuses on stability, on keeping essential services strong, and on ensuring that relief measures are sustainable, not just today, but into the future. Because governing is not about short-term applause, it's about long-term responsibility. And that, Mr. Deputy Speaker, is the fundamental difference between this side of the chamber and those opposite. The opposition also claims that there is no pipeline of infrastructure works. Again, did you even read the detail? Or are you again just trying to mislead Territorians? It's an extraordinary statement, Mr. Deputy Speaker, when this budget commits over $2 billion to capital works. The difference is that this government is not interested in vanity projects, press release infrastructure or schemes designed to win a headline and fail in delivery. I'm not sure if those on the other side of the chamber have been listening, but the members of the CLP Finocchiaro government are only interested in projects that can actually be built. Projects that support local contractors, projects that keep people employed, projects that improve roads, transport, housing and essential services across the Territory. Mr. Deputy Speaker, Territorians know that infrastructure doesn't materialise out of thin air. Infrastructure requires planning, prioritisation and, most importantly, financial discipline. So, Mr. Deputy Speaker, what did we inherit? A situation where announcements were plentiful, but delivery was patchy, where projects were promised without a credible pathway to completion, and where the books were stretched and confidence was slipping. This budget, Mr. Deputy Speaker, changes all of that. It focuses on deliverable projects. It prioritises infrastructure that supports jobs, unlocks economic potential, and strengthens our regions. And it does so in a way that restores confidence for investors, for industry, and for Territorians themselves. Because again, a real pipeline is not just a press release, it's a program of works that actually gets funded and actually gets built, Mr. Deputy Speaker. And just for 1 minute, can we be honest why those opposite are so agitated? Because this government is doing what they could not do. We are restoring discipline, backing the right priorities, and making decisions based on Territorians' long-term interests, not the short-term convenience of a political announcement. The opposition says there is no plan to support critical job-creating sectors, and the Leader of the Opposition talks about a lack of economic stimulus in the Budget 2026. Well, she must have glossed over the part of our budget where we are saving local businesses up to $68,750 a year through our increase to payroll tax, the payroll tax-free threshold. This was something that before the election, that industry and local businesses were crying out for, and it was something that once again Labor ignored. Labor's own forecasts when they were in government showed they failed to get Territorians into work faster, with employment growth lagging behind into the forward estimates and unemployment set to increase. Mr. Deputy Speaker, the plan is right there in the budget: infrastructure, services, housing, and the economic conditions that allow investment to follow. You do not grow an economy by grandstanding in this chamber. You grow it by creating confidence, maintaining stability, and building the foundations that business and industry rely on. Those opposite literally had decades to set that foundation, and they completely failed. Instead, Territorians got stagnant growth, fiscal drift, and an economy that too often held together by hope rather than hard work. That is the legacy of the former Labor government in this territory, and Territorians have every right to be sick of their lectures. This is perhaps the most revealing part of the opposition's argument, because it exposes their failure to understand what drives the territory economy. Our budget, excuse me. Our budget backs the sectors that matters: resources, tourism, defence, agribusiness, and emerging industries that will define the next decade. We are creating the conditions for investment, not suffocating it with uncertainty. We are working with industry, not against it, and we are ensuring that Territorians, not just outsiders, benefit from growth. Those opposite had the opportunity to diversify the economy, to build resilience, and set the territory up for a future. Instead, they delivered stagnation. And now they criticise a government that is doing the hard work to fix it. Mr. Deputy Speaker, this motion also falsely claims that there is no economic vision for the Northern Territory. Economic vision is not about grandstanding in this chamber. It's not about fantasy budgets or unsustainable commitments. It's not about pretending that you can spend your way out of every problem without consequence. Mr. Deputy Speaker, let me tell this House exactly what our vision is. Our vision is a territory that lives within its means, a territory that attracts investment, not repels it, a territory where young people can see a future and feel they have one to leave behind, a territory where infrastructure supports growth, not headlines, and a territory where government is a partner in progress, not a barrier to it. That is why this budget delivers. It's not flashy, it's not reckless, it's not designed to win a news cycle. It's designed to rebuild confidence, restore credibility, and lay the foundations for sustained growth. A territory where investment is welcomed. A territory where Territorians can build a life, a business, and a future without being held back by the complete incompetence from those opposite. Again, this is precisely why they are so uncomfortable. And that, Mr. Deputy Speaker, is the core problem for the opposition. They're not offering a credible alternative. They're not offering solutions. They're offering grievance. They're offering blame. They're offering a tired political script that Territorians have heard too many times before from a party that had a chance to lead and too often chose to drift. Because they know when this government succeeds, when we stabilise the finances, grow the economy and deliver for Territorians, their record will stand in even sharper contrast. When we talk about budget failures, Labor's failure to address the rising crime across the territory features highly on the list. Labor's budget was widely criticised as being too late to address our crime crisis, something they failed to admit was even happening until the 11th hour, right before the 2024 election. They govern for press release. We govern for the territory. They talk about change. We make change happen. They talk about responsibility. We practice it. They talk about growth, and we create the conditions for it. Mr. Deputy Speaker, I also want to quickly address the tone of this motion. To say that this budget completely fails Territorians is not just wrong, it's insulting, and it shows the opposition's complete inability to understand the budget papers and to also understand what Territorians have asked us to do in government. It is insulting to the businesses who are working hard every day to grow and create jobs. It's insulting to the families who will benefit from the targeted support. And importantly, it's insulting to the public servants and the stakeholders who have contributed to a budget built on careful consideration and responsible planning. Territorians deserve better than this kind of empty, hyperbolic politics. They deserve honesty, they deserve accountability, and they deserve a government and an opposition that deals in facts, not fear. Mr. Deputy Speaker, the truth is simple. Those opposite are long on criticism but short on solutions. They're quick to condemn but slow to reflect. They are far more interested in scoring political points than acknowledging their own role in the challenges that we face today. And this government will not be distracted by that. We will stay focused on the job at hand, repairing the finances, strengthening the economy, supporting Territorians, and building a future that is not defined by missed opportunities, but by real, tangible progress. So, Mr. Deputy Speaker, I say this to the opposition. If you want to talk about failure, look at your own record. If you want to talk about vision, explain why you failed to deliver one for 2 decades. If you want to earn the trust of Territorians, start by being honest with them. Because this budget is not a failure, it's a reset, it's a responsible plan, and it's a clear statement that this government is prepared to do what those opposite would never do. We make the tough decisions necessary to secure the Territory's future. Territorians are sick of your lectures, they are sick of your blame shifting, and they are sick of recycled outrage from a party that spent too many years in power and too little time delivering. And Mr. Deputy Speaker, Territorians are ready for something better. Budgets are never perfect, but I can hand on heart say that this one is honest. It is responsible. It is focused on the things that matter. And it's built on the simple principle that government should make life better, not more uncertain. This is what this government is doing, not with spin, not with excuses, and not with a hollow political theatre, with delivery. So I say to those opposite, do not come in here pretending that you have a record worth defending, because Territorians remember. I think Territorians know who they can trust when it comes to managing a budget. The only failure here is Labor. The only missed opportunity here is the 8 years wasted under Labor. And the only thing going backwards here is the Leader of the Opposition. Because the Leader of the Opposition had a chance to be constructive, listen to Territorians, and deliver new ideas to help drive the Territory forwards, to reduce crime, to rebuild our economy, and to restore our lifestyle. She's done none of the above, and Territorians shouldn't be surprised. And for all these reasons, Mr. Deputy Speaker, I reject this motion entirely and support the new one placed on the record.
Thank you, Member for Fannie Bay. Member for Johnston.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Mr. Deputy Speaker, I want to start by thanking the member for Fong Lim for expanding this conversation to the big questions. What is a budget? Who's it for? And I absolutely agree with him on one thing, that budgets are about more than just spending. That's right, they're about people. Whether the people we represent can access the services they need to live safe, healthy lives. That's a responsibility entrusted to us as their elected representatives. It's a responsibility of anyone in government, whatever their political party. And I note the motion and I note the amendment, and in response, I want to say I'm interested in looking forward and working together here in this chamber for all the people across the Northern Territory that all of us represent, not wasting the limited time we have in this chamber with the political attacks that both parties continue to engage with. Mr. Deputy Speaker, the budget is not some force of nature beyond our control. The budget is a set of decisions by the government, and it tells Territorians what the people who you've elected to look after you are doing with your money. It tells you what they prioritise, how the government plans to spend your money, and what kind of future this government's trying to build. Because, Mr Deputy Speaker, the economy is not separate from the health of our society, it's a reflection of it. The member for Fong Lim also said, like it or not, we need more prison cells. Member for Fong Lim, that's not a fact. That's a choice. It's a choice to keep pouring billions into prisons as a band-aid while ignoring the root causes of crime. And what makes that claim even more extraordinary is that the member for Fong Lim also told this House he's the most fiscally conservative person in this building, because there's nothing fiscally conservative about spending around $1.3 million a year to keep a single child in detention when they're where they're at much higher risk of recidivism once they leave, while refusing to invest in the early intervention that would actually stop that child being there in the first place. It's just not fiscally smart. So I do also agree with the member for Fong Lim that we need to be economically responsible, and that's exactly why we need a people-centred budget, not as a soft alternative to economic responsibility, but as the most strategic, effective and future-focused way to build a stronger, fairer Northern Territory. Because, Mr Deputy Speaker, people are the economy, and speaking of people, this government has spent a lot of time since the announcement of the budget talking about everyday Territorians. So I'd like to clarify what that means, because every time this government says everyday Territorians, there's a question hanging in the air. Which ones? This budget is not constrained by scarcity, despite what the government will try and make you believe. It's defined by choices. And the question is not whether we can afford to support people, it's who this government is choosing to support. Mr Deputy Speaker, everyday Territorians are the renters who cannot find an affordable home. They're the workers turning down jobs in my electorate who come to me and say that because they cannot find somewhere to live. They're the families stuck in overcrowded housing with no way out. So which everyday Territorians who are looking for safe housing does this budget back? Because it's not them. The gap between social housing and the private rental market remains untouched. The $608 million allocated to remote housing, land servicing and essential services is welcome, but it needs to be matched with the services that actually make housing work. And we've heard that from yourself, Mr Deputy Speaker. It needs to be matched with maintenance, with tenancy support, with community infrastructure. With $40 million, we could establish a Territory Affordable Rental Fund to deliver hundreds of affordable homes for key workers, for low-income renters and people transitioning out of homelessness. That would be an investment that grows, that leverages funding and delivers lasting housing. Instead, this budget leaves those people locked out. Mr Deputy Speaker, everyday Territorians are the people in remote communities who've seen infrastructure promised time and time again without the services needed to make it work. They're the local workers who could be employed in their own communities but are shut out by fly-in, fly-out models. So I ask again, which everyday Territorians is this budget backing, because it's not them? The 59% of infrastructure spend going to remote and regional communities is the right priority on paper, but infrastructure without services has a long history in the Territory and it hasn't worked. With $30 million, we could fund locally led jobs and services, community health workers, educators' aides, housing officers, designed and delivered by the communities themselves. We could restore proper operating night patrols and provide real transparency about where funding goes. And we could establish a transparent reporting mechanism so Territorians can see exactly what proportion of GST revenue reaches remote communities, which is what we get it for. Mr Deputy Speaker, everyday Territorians are the children sitting in detention on remand, not convicted of anything, waiting for weeks or months. They're the families trying to keep those children on track without the support they need. They're the lawyers carrying impossible caseloads, watching young people fall through the cracks. These are the everyday Territorians that this budget is not backing. Instead, when we talk about money, this budget's committed $250 million to new prisoner work camps, and I'm very interested to hear what that actually means, while we spend more than $3,600 a day to lock up a child. With that same money, we could fund a network of community-based youth support hubs across the Territory. in Darwin, Palmerston, Alice Springs, Katherine and key remote centres, with youth workers, with mental health care, with family support, with after-hours programs that actually prevent offending. With the $15 million allocated to design new prisons, we could fund therapeutic alternatives to remand that cost less and work better, bringing us into line with international human rights law and standards that outline that remand should be a last resort for children. We could properly resource legal services so people are not set up to fail. This budget does not choose prevention, it chooses prison and labels it as safety. Madam Speaker, everyday Territorians are the women calling a domestic and family violence service and being told there's no room, and they're the workers in those services, burnt out, underpaid, and leaving faster than they can be replaced. This budget does not back those everyday Territorians. In the budget papers, funding for domestic family and violence service is cut by 10% in the jurisdiction with the highest rates of domestic violence in the country. The budget delivers a $4.25 billion infrastructure program, and not $1 of that is to DV services that have to turn women away. With $50 million less than the cost of the new prison design that I've just mentioned, and a fraction of the corrections infrastructure spend, we could ensure no woman is forced to stay in an unsafe situation because there's nowhere for her to go. We could invest in crisis accommodation, outreach in remote communities, perpetrator programs that reduce reoffending, a workforce strategy to recruit and retain specialist domestic family violence workers, because we know that the Territory loses people faster than we train them. And this is not expensive, this is fiscally smart. Every dollar spent on domestic family and violence prevention saves an estimated $7 in downstream costs, in health, in justice and in child protection. Madam Speaker, everyday Territorians are the nurses and health workers doing back-to-back shifts, burnt out and stretched beyond capacity. They're the people sitting in emergency departments for hours waiting for care that should have been available long before things reach crisis point. And this budget does not back those everyday Territorians. There's no dedicated mental health budget line in the Treasurer's speech. With $80 million redirected from corrections infrastructure, we could build a real community mental health system. Step up, step down facilities in Darwin and Alice Springs so people can get support without going to an emergency department. Mental health nurses embedded in remote community clinics, and an alcohol and drug treatment expansion that actually meets the Territory's need, rather than a fraction of what we currently serve. But this budget funds the consequences, not the causes. Madam Speaker, everyday Territorians are the households paying high power bills. They're the workers who could have secure jobs in renewable energy. They're communities who need reliable, affordable power, and these everyday Territorians are not who this budget backs. The budget continues to back the gas industry, and the scale of that commitment is staggering. Hidden in the budget papers are more than $2 billion in liabilities and subsidies tied to gas development, including Beetaloo. Hundreds of millions have already been spent with no return to Territorians to date, and even the most optimistic projections show royalties delivering less than 1% of Territory revenue. And at the same time, the Territory is carrying growing debt, projected to reach $12.5 billion, while underwriting private industry risk. We're borrowing money to subsidise an industry that's unlikely to ever pay us back. That is not a sound economic strategy. It's a public subsidy model where the risk sits with Territorians and the benefit goes somewhere else. And while that risk goes, investment in the things that actually reduce cost of living, housing, energy, services, is being left behind. With $50 million, we could fund remote community microgrids, Territory-owned rooftop solar and a renewable workforce, lowering power bills, strengthening environmental resilience and creating real jobs. Instead, this budget continues to back an industry that has not delivered and expects everyday Territorians to carry the cost. Madam Speaker, everyday Territorians are the parents trying to get their kids to school, juggling work, transport, cost of living and everything else that comes with raising a family. They're also the kids who are falling behind, not because they don't want to learn, but because they need more support to get them there in the first place, and they need education that's appropriate and accessible and meets their needs, so when they're there, they stay. They're the teachers doing everything they can with limited resources, trying to keep students engaged and supported. And this budget does not back those everyday Territorians. It offers a very small investment in literacy and numeracy, but that won't help in getting kids back into the classroom. And instead of supporting families, we see a continued focus on punitive approaches like fines for school attendance. With real investment, we could support families to get kids to school, and we could support kids to stay there and learn. We could invest in transport, in community-based support and early intervention that actually addresses the reasons children are not attending. We could support teachers to do the job that we know they are passionate about and trained for, and build a properly resourced teacher workforce who stay in the Territory instead of burning out and leaving. Support that works with families and children, not against them. Because you can't punish your way to better education outcomes, and you can't fix education without the teachers to make it work. Madam Speaker, if this budget were truly for everyday Territorians, we would have no child in detention on remand because there's nowhere else for them to go, no woman turned away from a service that's there to keep them safe, mental health care before crisis point, homes that people can actually afford, remote communities with services, an energy system built for the future. And that Territory is possible right now within this budget. It does not require fairy dust. It just requires the political will to make different choices. Because when this government says everyday Territorians, what this budget shows us is this: they are not talking about everyone. And the cheapest, smartest and most effective way to build a stronger Territory is to put people, all people, at the centre of every decision we make. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Member for Fong Lim.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. If you just bear with me, I'm just going to grab the lectern.
So you're speaking to the amendment?
I am, Madam Speaker, that's correct. Madam Speaker, I had not anticipated speaking on this motion, let alone on the amended motion, and I rise to do so not to grandstand, not to try and set any sort of record, but because the Treasurer and the Government Whip have asked me to speak to the amended motion, because this is now morphed into quite an important debate about something more than just piling on the current budget, but actually thinking about what works, what doesn't, what constitutes success and what constitutes failure, and starting to flesh out actually some of the issues here which actually matter underpinning all of this. And it's about more than short-termism now, this debate that we're having today. And that's why I've risen to speak again. I'm going to pick up on a couple of the points that have been made in the debate, but let's begin by simply framing the debate again. The amended motion that the Treasurer has moved is not one that I probably ordinarily would have wanted to get up and jump on the bandwagon for, but I actually think this is the moment and the opportunity to sincerely have a discussion about condemning Labor for its legacy of debt, not just as a throwaway, but genuinely because this is probably the line in the sand. This government is 2 years into its term, but in August. We're not going to spend next year and next budget talking about what happened for the last 8 years, or I certainly will make the commitment that I won't be. You have to draw a line in the sand somewhere in relation to this discussion, this debate. But what's obvious to me, and the reason I chose to speak on this at the length that I did today, is that there's still a huge amount of misunderstanding. It's maybe not denialism, it's fundamental misunderstanding of we have inherited a miserable position, and that miserable position is the function of choices that were made. I'm not suggesting, hand on heart, that those choices were made maliciously, but I am suggesting that they were conscious choices, right? Some of them may have been made as a function of ineptitude rather than malice, but they were made nonetheless. And the cumulative consequence of all of those decisions, the tyranny of small choices, as I was pointing out today, the Kahn paper from 1966, is to result in where we are at now, where we are under enormous amounts of debt, right? So let's start with the debt proposition. Actually, just before I turn to debt, I just want to, again, clarify. The amended motion here is to condemn Labor for its legacy of debt, for delay and decline, and for leaving the CLP to clean up the mess restore fiscal discipline, rebuild the economy, and deliver the practical relief, infrastructure and jobs Territorians deserve. I don't have the time to break down every component of that, but the fact is I could speak to every component of that. And in a nutshell, legacy of debt, that's what we should talk about here first, and I want to do so with reference to what the member for Gwoja just said. Delay and decline, I think it's extremely important to talk about those delays and that decline, the forwarding on of what was happening in infrastructure. Decline pertains to also people, which I couldn't agree with you more, member for Johnston. Budgets are about people. We don't have enough of them, and that's why we're in the mess we're in. We'll get to that in a second. And leaving us to clean up the mess, we have been left to clean up the mess. And I tell you what, not for nothing, for a little footnote for fun over the other side, it ain't much fun being a backbencher in a government that's got to clean up the mess. You're cleaning up even worse mess in some ways. So I'm not enjoying the mess that we inherited, and I'd like you to understand once and for all what that mess is about so that we can agree on common terms and move forward about what we might do to actively stop creating more mess. And finally, restoring fiscal discipline. We're not banning those words around now. You can actually see the Treasurer is doing something about restoring fiscal discipline now. I will come back to fiscal conservatism in a second, because the fact is I am absolutely the fiscal conservative in here. If I had my way, things would be very, very different in terms of what we would do to turn the ship around faster. But I don't have my way. The reality is, be thankful I don't in some ways. Fiscal conservatism at this point is what is required, but fiscal integrity and discipline is what is required more. And the Treasurer is doing that in the most manageable possible way. Would I spend all of this money in the way that we're spending it on a range of things? No, I absolutely wouldn't. I absolutely wouldn't. But I was around when I watched Liz Truss and Kwasi Kwarteng just about tank the UK economy overnight by doing too much, too soon, too fast. So I also understand that sometimes it takes a long time to turn a barge around. And practical relief, that's what we've got in our cost of living stuff. That's the practical relief side of it. Infrastructure, which we've bandied about in this House a lot, and the jobs Territorians deserve. And you can say jobs, jobs, jobs as many times as you like, but no genie is coming to create those jobs, whatever your past treasurers might have said to you. It's just not how it works. Those jobs will come downstream when investment returns, when actual economic confidence returns, when you restore some fiscal integrity to our marketplaces. Now, this speech is jumping around a lot more than my usual ones, but the bottom line is that, as I say, I'm passionate about the subject matter. I've been asked to speak on the matter today because I think this is our last best chance to frame discussions about why we are where we are and where we go from here. Because there will be a next round of conversations that are coming next year, the year after, and probably for a decade going forth, about how we start institutionally making money, saving money, and stopping the wastage of money, and not just spending money. Now, I already gave a version of the speech where I've explained budgets are about more than spending money. So let's come back to some of the more workable propositions that came from the member for Gwoja and the member for Johnston, both of whom made some meaningful points there. The first is to the point that was made by the member for Gwoja that not all debt is bad debt. Absolutely. Absolutely. I've been saying it from day one. Not all debt is bad debt. But $14 billion of debt in a place with only 265,000 people and 27,000 public servants and no serviceable workforce or industry, that's bad. That's bad debt. That's not good debt. That's too much debt, right? Serviceable debt, yes, a good thing. I take the interjection from the member for Blaine. You do not want to be borrowing to pay the bills in perpetuity. What you want at a certain point is to start making money in some form. And we've got to have those conversations more honestly about what we're willing to risk to make money, to spend on the things you want to spend on. So the first thing is I couldn't agree more. Not all debt is bad debt. Really, when we're having this conversation, we're maligning two things. Debt and credit, which are two different concepts, but this is not an economics lecture. The bottom line is that you want to be able to ultimately borrow money to productively use to grow the economy and create not just growth for growth's sake. That's cancer. That's malignancy. You want to be able to grow for the sake of creating productive opportunity. And I have spoken about my vision. This is my personal take on an architecture of opportunity for the north of Australia, where we focus on public health, housing, education and infrastructure again, to create common opportunity again for people to pull themselves up by their bootstraps across all segments of society. That's my personal hobby horse. We can come back to talking about that another time. But the bottom line is that we all, using different language, basically want to be able to create a place where people can get a leg up. And none of us particularly want to destroy the Northern Territory lived environment or built environment either. right? The natural environment for that matter. I mean, we will come back to that, but the point is that the reason I'm bringing it into the debate is because the fact is a lot of our wealth creation prospects are tied to taking risks on our environment. That's the reality of it. Tomorrow, I'm not going to foreshadow debate. Tomorrow, or at some point on the notice paper, there's going to be a discussion about minerals titles legislation and what we're willing to do to explore, to give ourselves new opportunity again in resource extraction. That's a conversation I'm going to be a part of and I get behind. Because the fact is, that's what the Northern Territory was built on. My granddad was a hydrologist here. My family are all invested in mines and energy. The fact is we haven't opened a new mine for 10 years. And the only one that did open was Core Lithium, and that's because we got out of its way. Right? And the fact is we need more mining if we are going to grow the economy here based on the fact that our natural resources are something that we can work with. Now, gas and mineral extraction, two different conversations, but I'm not anti-gas either. The bottom line is gas is the biggest game in town. And the major difference between the opposition and this side right now is we've been unequivocal in our support of it. Unequivocal in the sense that we're saying no confusion, all signals to market are, if you can find it and get it out at the right price point, if you can make it add up, we will back it and we will get out of your way in making it happen. The other side could not decide which way they want to go on this. Now, I have said, and I say it publicly, I said it before I was a political candidate, so I can say it as much as I like. I'm not anti-gas, I'm not anti-fracking, I'm not anti-mining. I am pro things that add up. If it doesn't add up economically, why are we doing it? Now, the fact is, there is still a very real possibility that our gas ventures will add up. And that's why we're still going down this road. There's no doubt about it. There's absolutely no doubt about the fact that we've expended a huge line of credit and we've expended a huge line. We've basically given a series of extractive industries the opportunity to demonstrate that this is going to work and work for everyone in the long run. And the multiplier effects of those industries are significant if they pay off. And that's the thing. You can't just pull the rug out at a point. Again, I'm not on the Public Accounts Committee, but those of you who are made the choice, made the decision that the shiplift will go ahead. Doesn't matter what crappy conditions we decided to persist with it for the last 8 years, at this point it will go ahead. I'm simply not privy to the information to argue with that case at this point, so I'm not going to. It's basically the same proposition with gas. No matter what Senator Pocock wants to say, and can I just say I'm a huge fan of his, so I feel kind of, nerding out as a rugby player, I mean, predominantly. But the bottom line is that I can't say enough. That debate is now becoming unconstructive, right? It's not about starting from this point, having discussion about extraction of gas and what needs to be done to make it worth everyone's while. It's about looking at the totality of the situation, what's been invested by many people, not just in financial terms, but in labour terms, in ideas terms, in opportunity cost. The fact is, we're not going to suddenly just switch that off. We're maintaining consistency on that position until such time that it's obvious that it cannot persist and/or something horrible happens which makes it unviable. But here's the thing on the something horrible happening part. And this is, I know I'm jumping around, but again, I want to come to water pricing because, again, that's a great idea, but not one that the last government was interested in discussing when they were in government. We'll come back to that in a second. The bottom line is that we have to have ways to make money, and we're not really honestly discussing the ones that are in front of our faces that could create the possibility, the multiplier effects, the opportunity to refund and to reorganise our spending priorities. What's mostly being spoken about in the context of budget debate here today, or budget philosophy, is spending priorities, but not anything to do with, for example, risk, not anything to do with investment, not anything to do with overall structural reform or how we might reorganise our economic affairs. So let me come back to some of the concrete points here. The first is that not all debt is bad debt. I agree, but put simply, right now we have way too much debt. And we have so much debt that unfortunately it's disinhibiting anything else happening productively, right? That's the reality of it. So you have to at least start the process of reducing that debt so that you have a fighting chance of being able to provide people confidence to reinvest in this marketplace. Because right now, the Treasurer's not hiding anything. He's not hiding state final demand. He's not hiding private investment. He's not hiding where our growth prospects are right now. He's saying, I've been dealt a crappy hand and I'm doing my very best to prioritise, consistent with the government's priorities, that we will keep on the same course of law and order and maintaining confidence in community safety as that being our number one priority. And the reason we're doing that is because we're hearing it loud and clear still. Like, even I hear it. I get frustrated about it. I have constituents still coming in, and I want to talk about other bigger stuff now, and it's like, no, I'm still pissed off about the state of, drunks on buses, or I'm still annoyed about XYZ antisocial behaviour. And I'm like, no, PPSOs are coming, public safety officers are coming, they're on their way, and that should hopefully help. Let's see how that goes. But the fact is, people are not already like at one with the idea that we've solved the law and order problem. And that's why the budget is devoted to basically continuing on the track of improving community safety, like investing in corrections, investing in police. This is our mantra at this point, right? And if we fail, fine, we'll fail, but we'll have a consistent position and we'll die on this hill because we are staying true to our course in this regard. You know, the fact is I'm waiting for the day when it starts to pay off so that then we can move on to some of the other stuff, the more downstream rehabilitative stuff, to move on to the structural economic reform stuff. I want for that future as well. But for all of us to get to the next pass, we've got to get past this hump. And this hump right now is one that, honestly speaking, just about no one in this room is really super responsible for. It's other people who are above our pay grade, who were here for the last 20 years, who made a series of imperfect choices, some lazy, probably not very many that were malicious, but genuinely some of them that just cumulatively added up to the tyranny of small choices and resulted in astronomical levels of debt, stagnant population growth, low levels of private investment, an imperfect arrangement with the Commonwealth where they don't own our problems nor pay us to fix them properly. If you want to move forward on this, stop moving motions every day which are just about short-termism and getting something inflammatory on the notice paper. I move that on the next general business day, I want to prosecute this hobby horse that I'm pissed off about now on the basis that it will track well for media today. That's what we're dealing with here. So you want to have an honest conversation about budgets, reform, the economy? Well, let's have it. Let's have it. And then we can actually horse trade and we can make out like a grown-up parliament rather than a place of dysfunction and despair. And that is the way forward for us. But it's not going to happen if we just keep going, he said, she said, he said, she said. I assure you, this will be the last 4.5 and then another 10, I assure you, minutes of me talking about this and me talking about the last 8 years of Labor budgets. But after that, we've got to start agreeing on some terms because otherwise we will keep going round and round in circles. The member for Johnston is 100% right on this. Budgets are about people. Budgets are about people. It's about people. And that is the whole reason I came back to the Northern Territory, because you could see from the other side of the planet that we had no vision for people. We had no vision for labour, population, labour with a U, not party, labour. Labour people, labour, migration, population, higher education, training, right? Like the tertiary education sector, talent acquisition. We do not have enough people to do the things we need to do in the Northern Territory. We're not just short of doctors and teachers and nurses, we're short of bass players. If you don't get along with the one guy who plays the bass in this town, you're not doing a gig. I mean, the bottom line is that we need more people. I'm glad the member for Gwoja and I do not like each other and don't agree on anything, but we agree we need more people. The more people we can get in this place, the less likely it is that he and I will have to interact with each other. We can interact with those other people instead. Hear, hear. Now, the fact of the matter is that budgets are about people, and I'm supporting this motion, which is a absolutely clean-cut, like at the beginning of these proceedings, you would have seen, there was a motion moved by the government, by the opposition. There was suggestions of that being amended. I did not want it to be amended because I said, let the opposition have their motion. Let us talk about budgets and budget failure writ large. And then, once we've reached this point now, it's been moved because clearly we've exhausted that, and now we are condemning the former government for the mistakes that it has made in relation to debt, delay, decline. And on the decline one, nothing is more obvious and ties this together more than population decline. We are all talking about the same thing. Every one of these lunches and breakfasts we go to at budget time, every conversation we have, every little news soundbite, it's always about don't have enough workers, don't have anyone sticking around, how are we going to attract and retain people? Well, let's start having the conversation for real, because we are mostly doing what we've already done, and I think the member for Port Darwin, who's the relevant minister in this space, is doing a better job of working on some of those areas now with our global worker attraction stuff and whatnot. We're targeting better markets. We're making more savvy use of online mechanisms. Worker Connect is working better. We're definitely doing better, but we're basically doing the same. And if you want to do something new and better, work with us, because you know who controls the levers on migration? The federal government. And if we want some more cooperation with the federal government on terms of migration for the north of Australia to create greater labour supply to support us across all sectors in industry, we need your help. We need your help on that. We can't do it alone. That's the reality of it. All significant manoeuvres in economic reform through Australian political history happen through behind-the-scenes horse trading, right? So if you really want more people, more skilled workers, more workforce, then band together with us to ask for it. Because we're not going to get it by ourselves, and you don't have the numbers to get it. But together we actually could. The whole of the north of Australia, for that matter, North Queensland, North West Australia, we're in the same predicament. None of us can get the right people or keep them once we've got them. And the fact is, we all require better terms on migration for the north of Australia. That's the job I came back here to do. If I get nothing done in this parliament other than make a modest contribution on that before I lose my seat, then I'll be very happy. But before I go, I would really love it if all of us could agree on that one thing and moving forward on it. Because right now, we all know that the federal government controls the levers on the two biggest things that matter to us. All of our pocket money in GST and grants and the terms on migration. Labour and capital. Labour and capital. If we're going to move ahead on labour and capital, we need cooperation across this parliament. The trouble is that sometimes, unless you're willing...
Oh, please pause. Member for Fong Lim.
This is a group point of order. Group executive. Standing order 43, I'll move it first. I want to hear from my member for Fong Lim.
This is a rare sight.
I know, but
multiple people
I'm
wanting
to
to
move.
extend your speech, member for Fong Lim.
Standing order 43, I would love to continue to hear from the member for Fong Lim, who I don't hate, I might dislike, but I really want to hear his contribution tonight.
That's very kind. All those in favour of giving the member for Fong Lim an extension, please proceed.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I thank the members of the Assembly who are present and tuning in. I really do think, I mean, there's a serious set of points to be made here. Like, it is just, you know, it's often said of student politics that it's hard fought because there's so little at stake, right? It's just where you learn to cut your teeth and beat up on each other. And the trouble is in a 25-person assembly, when we're all trying to wear a lot of hats and have to individually know 6,000 people's names and the names of all their pets in order to actually get back in the building, we sometimes lose the wood for the trees on the higher order political stuff. And it's great to see some fresh, you know, faces in the room. And I really hope that there is a future where we can work more cooperatively together. It's why I came here. I know that there is a time for us to be combative. I just really hope we can become a parliament again that boxes and punches above the belt and fights clean. Because if we do, we have a better chance of actually staging better fights, frankly, and ultimately probably bringing more people in to watch them. Because at the moment, a lot of Territorians are switched out to what's happening here. We're having this discussion. I don't know what poor sucker public servant is still there at 6:15 watching this at this point, but it ain't many people watching this debate at this point, right? I mean, we actually need to find a way to communicate to our constituency a shared vision on how to grow the Northern Territory economy, not for the sake of growth, but for the sake of creating opportunity for people. And we have got to find a way to respectfully disagree about our prescription for that. There is a tough law and order, more stick than carrot approach to that on this side of the House. There absolutely is. You can respectfully disagree with that. That's fine. Then offer me your alternative instead. You know, offer me something concrete that's more than just platitudes. On economics specifically. On economics specifically. Because we just are not making serious policy choices. We're doing things that are reactionary and short-term in this place, and it's the pace at which that's been happening has been getting faster and faster and worse, and hollowing out the productive capacity of the Northern Territory. Right? We are losing people and ideas and money and confidence when we fail to cooperate. That's what ends up happening. On the matter of fiscal conservatism, as I said, what I mean by that, I really want to get this clear. I'm not pretending to be anything I'm not. Everybody knows I'm a Liberal Democrat, basically. But the bottom line is that, what I'm talking about in fiscal conservative terms is that we need a smaller, tighter, more productive economy, right? Right now what we have is a giant, bloated, ineffective edifice that does not generate enough activity or productivity. And everybody's too scared to do anything about it or say anything about it. We are doing something about it. We're not doing it in a dim-witted, ham-fisted way like some past governments have gone when they're just like, efficiency dividend, slash 20%, Predictably, you hollow out the real workers when that happens and management sticks around. That's just like management 101. So you want to talk about it, we have to have an honest conversation together about what we need to run our public sector so that we create options for the private sector. Right now, it doesn't pay off to be in the private sector in the north of Australia. We've got to create conditions for people to want to work in the private sector because it's not just competitive with, but it can be better than being in the public sector. This is not about bashing on public servants. The reality of it is that we need public servants, we need a civil service, and in a place that is state-controlled, we absolutely need more of them than other places. That's always been the case. When you're a frontier economy, that's absolutely what you need. But right now, nobody in their right mind will tell you that we have the mix right. You can't have 265,000 people and 27,000 public servants and productivity that is absolutely this low. It's just not, it's not feasible, it's not realistic. So let's talk about it together so that we can have an honest conversation about productivity reform, public sector reform, structural economic reform. And you know what? My learned colleague maybe isn't using the words that I'm using in this regard, but he's actually doing that. That's the thing. Give him some credit in that regard. Like, the fact is he's had to find a way to slow down the rate at which we're accumulating debt, right? And also to figure out a way to add value and keep investing in frontline services. Because right now, no one in their right mind in here is saying that public health, housing, education, infrastructure are tracking amazing. Nobody thinks they are. We're all trying to make them better, right? But the way to make them better is not to go, he said, she said, backwards and forwards on, you didn't do anything about private maternity. No, you didn't do anything about private maternity. Well, how about at this point, we all put down our weapons and agree, seriously, we probably collectively might have a better chance of bringing back confidence to our health ecosystem, private operators in that space, cooperation with the federal government, whoever the ministers are that are relevant at the moment. We have just got to find more constructive ways to have the debate, the discussion, and then with a considered position, take it to people who can help us and work with us. It's not going to happen overnight, though. And I mean, as I said, I'm not in the business of supporting things like this, which are just about punching down. I am supporting this because I think it's worth supporting today. I want the notice paper to read that this was the gamesmanship that we started this discussion with, and I want it for the record to see that we evolved to a position where we as the government are condemning the last 3 lots of Labor governments for some of the poor choices they've made, because you know what? That also holds us to account. Come back later and then say, you condemned us for X, Y, and Z. What have you done to make it better? Well, I will use my time here working with all of the people here I can to try and make sure we do better on cleaning up the mess, on restoring fiscal integrity, on slowing down the rate of debt and or starting to repay it, on returning market confidence, on ensuring that we turn around and arrest demographic decline. It's not going to happen overnight, but I mean, as I said, we have to start somewhere. Now, a couple of niche points that I think are important to clarify. Again, the member for Johnston pointed out, it's not a given that we need more prison cells. I'm sorry, respectfully, I disagree. At the moment, it's pretty clear we do need more prison cells because we've got people who are surplus to capacity and we can't accommodate them. So it's really that simple. Like, I'm not hoping that we keep jailing people at the rate that we have been for ever and a day in the north of Australia. Nobody wants that. But right now, we need more space and capacity in the correctional services system. And so there's a master plan. There's a plan that the minister is following through. I think we've got to give it a go. And you know, I think it's as simple as that. Some of these decisions could and should have been made. And again, if I wanted to just be an arse about it, then I could go through and pull out where, these treasurers tell you all about how they're investing in the long-term future of correctional capacity. But that's not what's happened. So we've got a plan. We are now trying to build more prisons, not because our master plan is just to imprison everyone in the Northern Territory, but so you can create the necessary space you require to accommodate what is an expanded prison population. Facing reality, that's what it's about here. And look, to the same point, scarcity was a point that was brought up. We are absolutely restrained by scarcity. It's ridiculous to suggest that we're not. There's only so much money, there's only so many people. What we have is abundance of space and probably natural resources that we can't find unless we facilitate the conditions to find that stuff and get it out at the right price point. But scarcity is a significant constraint. So it's not productive in government or in opposition to just be like, give me more, I want more. I agree, there are some things that are really, really time sensitive and are important to your community. Fine, fight for those things. I'm not saying that, if you've got a Jabiru airport that's about to tank it, that there isn't a strong business case to salvage that, right? It's just, I'm just using a case in point. But the bottom line is that we are constrained by scarcity, so don't throw temper tantrums about small stuff. Pick the fights that are worth picking. A starving lion does not hunt mice, right? A starving lion does not hunt mice. Preserve your energy. Wait for a gazelle, an antelope, and then take it down. That's the reality of it. That's the way we work with scarcity. I'm not getting into goose today. Look, budgets are about choices. And the fact is, the member for Johnston is right in that regard. And the choice I would like you all to start thinking about making is about how to enlarge the size of the pie, right? And there's only so many ways to do that. The honest truth of it is there's only so many ways to do that. And in the short run, our best viable bet is in the extractive industry space, right? I have a different philosophy slightly to the deputy leader in this regard, but I'm broadly on board with the fact that we have fantastic natural resources that we have to find a way to be able to capitalise upon. And that could be stuff that's in the ground, and that could be stuff that's in the sky. But I'm just not interested in the cherry picking and the culture war stuff that's not helping us grow the size of the pie. So if you want to grow the size of the pie, once again, a coordinated position that we take to the federal government would get us a lot further than just, slinging mud at one another. And look, the idea of pricing water, personally speaking, I actually think there's a lot of legs in that. Nobody's had the guts to do it. If you want to have an honest conversation about that, you can have it with me. I'm the one guy who turns up to all of the unpopular places. Every environment centre talk, I'm there because somebody's got to be there. And the fact is, we could price water. That's just one idea, though. There are a whole range of things. So bring new ideas to the table. Madam Speaker, I'm simply going to close by noting that I look forward to contributing to other General Business Day motions, and I look forward to the opposition bringing substantive ideas to the table for us to actually debate sensibly, rather than us just cherry-picking inflammatory topics to fling mud at one another. I do support the motion. I think Labor does deserve condemnation for its fiscal mismanagement over 8 years, but I hope that we can move forward constructively from this point onwards. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker.
Member for Nightcliff, speaking to the amended motion.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I wish to speak against the amended motion being put forward this evening. And I appreciate the contributions from the member for Fong Lim. There's a lot to unpack there, and I look forward to debating those topics with you in the next 2.5 years. At a time when Territorians and territory businesses need a government that actually steps up and delivers real cost of living relief, real action on the housing crisis and real economic stimulus, this CLP government continues to let them down. Since becoming the member for Nightcliff, I've had many conversations with Territorians across business, across industry, across our community services sector, and the message is very, very clear. The government is doing nothing to address the real social and economic challenges facing the Territory. I can only presume those opposite are hearing the same thing. We speak with the same stakeholders, we attend the same events. So the question really is, why are they so unwilling or unable to do anything about it? The Territory is facing a massive and growing infrastructure deficit, built up over years and now made worse by cuts, delays and underspending. Despite a $1 billion roads budget, there is no clear pipeline of projects and no sense of urgency to get works out the door. After 2 years, there is still no long-term infrastructure plan, no clear priorities and no roadmap for the future, simply a dot point list of projects. Territorians are entitled to ask basic questions about which roads matter most, which corridors will drive growth and what the plan is to improve connectivity and resilience. Right now, there are no clear answers. Infrastructure investment is one of the most powerful drivers of economic growth in the Territory. It creates jobs, supports local businesses and lays the foundations for long-term prosperity. But without a steady, long-term pipeline of work, businesses cannot plan, workers cannot build careers, and investment stalls. The $1 billion ripped out of last year's budget is a massive investment gap that has had a significant and ongoing impact on Territory construction businesses and on construction jobs. The CLP has doubled down on this approach by further slashing $100 million out of the infrastructure budget. What's even more concerning is that those opposite have failed to get any of the remaining funding out the door. The clear message from the CLP government is that they have left it to private business to do the heavy lifting when it comes to stimulating and growing the economy. Unmistakable evidence, Madam Speaker, of a government that has completely taken its hands off the wheel. We are a small jurisdiction. There will always be a need for government to step in and support with economic stimulus through strategic public investment. On the back of a severe wet season, cost of living pressures and global instability pushing up fuel prices, communities need that investment more than ever. Yet the CLP government continues down the path of slashing infrastructure investment at the same time as failing to get work out the door. Currently, there's only one major road sealing project at tender in the market. We are hearing up and down the track that businesses are contemplating shutting up shop and moving interstate. We know that many have had to make hard decisions to lay people off. The government needs to act, and act now, to get public investment moving as quickly as possible because Territorians depend on it. There are endless examples in the budget of where this government has dropped the ball and failed to grasp the importance of long-term strategic investment. A sample of some major projects that have stalled on the CLP watch include the Mereenie Loop Road. This could be backing our tourism industry down in the red centre. Central Arnhem Road, where's the investment to assist Nhulunbuy and those communities transitioning with the closure of the mine? Buntine Highway, where is the support to back the investment in the Bradshaw Range and other military facilities in the region, as well as the pastoralists in those communities? Port Keats Road, this is another key corridor that has been on the budget paper for years. We still don't have a clear picture of when that's going to occur, and from the response today, the Minister for Logistics and Infrastructure is assuring us that that tender is going to go out next financial year. Similar with the Tiwi Islands roads. I know this has been followed very closely by the member for Arafura. The Tiwi Islands have a very short construction window of a handful of months when construction can occur on the islands. If that tender is not out as of almost tomorrow, another year will be lost for that project. We can't afford to keep missing the construction window on the Tiwi Islands and the impacts that it has on those communities socially, economically and environmentally. Some other projects scrapped by the CLP government. The Gunbalanya Health Clinic and Morgue. Again, member for Arafura has been watching this one very closely. This is absolutely critical to health infrastructure for that community. In terms of fiscal responsibility that's come up today, it is not fiscally responsible to pay for the travel for those community members to come to Darwin on such a regular basis, especially to access something as basic as that healthcare. Ali Kurung school upgrades have been massively downgraded. One of the most disadvantaged communities in the Territory and one of the most run-down schools has had funding for a much-needed upgrade cruelly scrapped. $30 million out of the Jabiru Futures to support the transition to a tourism town, scrapped. Alice Springs Art Gallery. This should have been a significant economy-boosting, job-creating project, but the CLP has made a political decision to scrap it rather than support the people and the economy of Central Australia. If the Territory is serious about catching up on its infrastructure deficit, it must also get serious about building and retaining a skilled local workforce. That requires certainty. It requires a clear pipeline of projects that apprentices, tradies, contractors to build long-term future careers here at home. Infrastructure is not just about concrete and bitumen, it's about people, skills and opportunity. Investing in roads is one of the most direct ways to ease cost of living pressures, yet it continues to be overlooked as the projects continue to revote on the budget papers. What the Territory needs is a clear, funded, long-term infrastructure pipeline that sets priorities, has timelines, and is actually delivered on the ground. It needs a government that will work in genuine partnership with industry and local government, fast-track projects that are already funded but sitting idle, and invest in training and apprenticeships alongside infrastructure delivery. Above all, it needs leadership that understands infrastructure is not a cost, but an investment in our Territory's future. Madam Speaker, this government's hands-off approach extends to housing investment across the Territory. Every single Territorian should have the chance to own their own home, but on the CLP's watch, we've seen housing construction stall and affordability collapse. There are a number of drivers: limited land release, high construction costs, and no focus on boosting our stocks of affordable housing.
Would you pause, Member for Nightcliff? What's your point of order, Member for Gwoja?
Standing Order 83, or I'll take 35, relevance to subject. I just note the ruling you made at the beginning. And while this is a wonderful budget speech, I do wonder if it's related to the motion at all. I'm just not getting a bed within 10 minutes. I'm just waiting for it to get to the amended motion.
Look,
that's why I asked for a ruling.
Please be seated. For this motion, I've allowed absolute latitude for everyone. At any point, I probably could have shut all of you down for the Standing Order 83. So given that, I will let people proceed. We've only got 25 minutes of the debate left. So hold on. Let's listen and be respectful. Thank you. Member for Daly, please.
Thank you, Madam Speaker.
You be nice too. Okay, let's have some calm. Let's focus back on the member for Nightcliff.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. This budget delivers the bare minimum without any real genuine commitment to addressing the housing crisis that is a reality for too many Territorians. Decent housing is an absolutely fundamental human right and an enabler of better employment, health and education outcomes, which is why it is beyond belief that this government seems to be actively working to deny people a decent home rather than addressing chronic housing shortages across the Territory and the highest rate of homelessness in the country. There is very little in the budget
Silence,
to
please.
boost...
Member for Berkeley. Sorry, what's your point of order, Member for Daly?
It was going to be Standing Order 20. The member for Berkeley keeps interrupting. But I believe you made a ruling on that.
Let's just...
thank you for that.
I'll keep that in mind when you start interrupting again, Member for Daly. But I take your point, he was interrupting. Cease your interjections, Member for Berkeley. Continue, Member for Nightcliff.
Thank you, Madam Speaker.
We're getting to the witching hour now.
It appears we are. The highest rate of homelessness in the country, Madam Speaker. There is very little in the budget to boost public housing stock or ensure existing stock is up to scratch. There is, however, a mysterious $1.5 million line item to de-densify public housing sitting in the Department of Chief Minister and Cabinet's budget. I would be very interested to know from the government what that scope is. Is it paying consultants?
Member for Nelson.
Is it making repairs? What is the scope of that $1.5 million? The Chief Minister needs to come clean with the community and explain what that money is for. She should also tell us how she intends to deal with the fact that this will put more people into unstable housing conditions or homelessness. The vast majority of public housing tenants look after their places. They are good neighbours and contributing members of our community. Of course, there are many ways we can improve the way we design and build public housing, Madam Speaker, right across the Territory. but the CLP are not interested in trying.
Silence.
The budget includes $22.8 million in Housing Future Fund projects. This is woefully inadequate. Without greater investment in affordable housing, we're going to see more and more Territorians slip through the cracks. The Housing Future Fund is a significant bucket of Commonwealth funding designed to support community housing providers to boost affordable housing stock. Unfortunately, the CLP government has sent a clear message that they don't support more affordable housing in our communities.
Okay, silence.
At a time when we are seeing more and more people facing rental stress, this is irresponsible and short-sighted choice. And it is a choice. It is a choice, Madam Speaker. A choice to spend more and more money on prison beds while denying more and more hard-working Territorians their own home. That should be the focus. We know the budget provides no additional cost of living relief for Territorians at a time when people are finding it harder to cover bills, particularly the more than 50% of Territory households living in rental accommodation. The rental affordability snapshot released by Anglicare last month paints a very concerning picture. Only 257 private rentals advertised across the NT. How are we going to grow the economy with that few rentals? 0% of listings were affordable and appropriate for Territorians on youth allowance or disability support pension or age pension, or even for a single person on the minimum wage. Even for a couple of children where both adults were working full-time only, on a minimum wage, only 5% of listings were affordable and appropriate. Average advertised rent also rose to $713, Madam Speaker. What this clearly demonstrates is that the private housing market is simply not affordable for people on low incomes. The result is more Territorians pushed into housing stress, overcrowding or homelessness. This puts greater stress on our broader housing market, on our health facilities and on our justice and police when people don't have stable and reliable housing. Yet what the CLP has delivered is a budget that seeks to reduce social housing stock while failing to deliver any kind of relief.
Can you just pause, please? If I hear someone say Lee Point again, they can take an hour out of the chamber and go and have a look at Lee Point. Please continue. Member for
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I highly recommend a visit. Yeah, what the CLP has delivered is a budget that seeks to reduce social housing stock while failing to deliver any kind of relief to Territory renters or investing in a pipeline of affordable housing stock. It is pleasing that the CLP government has signed up to the 10-year $4 billion remote housing program with the Commonwealth government. It is a legacy of the former Labor government, but fine for them to claim it, so long as they are building more houses in our remote communities. While there is allocation in the budget to roll out the program, we are extremely concerned by what we're hearing on the ground. That this CLP government is now trying to dip into funding that has been allocated solely for new housing to pay for subdivisions and land servicing. This is absolutely not on, Madam Speaker. The terms of the remote housing agreement are clear. Every cent of that agreement must go to housing. The NT government's attempts to divert some of that money to pay for work they are responsible for has meant that critical work has stalled. They need to be absolutely clear with Territorians around whether they will actually meet their targets under the remote housing agreement, and if not, why not? We will continue to monitor the rollout of this project very carefully. Tourism is a vital part of the Territory economy. It is a critical job-creating sector that delivers significant financial and lifestyle benefits to our regions and cities. It is also a key employer for Aboriginal Territorians who can offer immersive tourism experiences that sustain future generations and support their communities, participating in a sector that benefits their community and families economically, socially and culturally. There are over 1,400 tourism businesses across the Territory, largely small businesses collectively employing thousands of Territorians. But this year, tourism operators are truly feeling uncertain about what should be their busiest time of the year. While the tourism and hospitality industry is an optimistic and resilient sector, we need to acknowledge when times are tough. But at the very moment they need support, this CLP government has stepped back. Across the board, the tourism industry is under near unprecedented pressure, especially our small and family operators. They are facing a perfect storm of the most severe wet season on record, rising fuel prices and declining aviation access. These negative impacts are flowing right through to operators and visitors alike. The rising fuel costs alone are increasing operating expenses for businesses, transport, logistics, generators and remote operations. This has been forcing operators to make difficult decisions, such as cancelling routes, increasing their ticket prices, or even cancelling services altogether. This is seriously impacting operators who are already cash-strapped after the disruptions of the past wet season.
Please pause. Member for Nightcliff. Member for Karama.
Order 43, can we grant an extension?
Is an extension of time supported? Those of that opinion say aye. On the contrary, no. Thank you. An extension is supported. You will be heard in silence. Okay, silence for the member for Nightcliff.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I appreciate Member for Karama, and I do apologise for not mentioning you yesterday when I was referencing the City of Darwin. Former colleague, great to see you and join you in this place, Member for Karama. At the same time, visitation is weakening. Travellers' willingness to come to the Territory is softening, further constricting operators' ability to trade. The drive market, an incredibly important part of visiting and seeing the Territory, is under threat. We know this because we are hearing from operators that bookings are down on last year or are being cancelled altogether. Industry is telling us that forward bookings are down 39%. Some are even predicting a significant downturn of 50%, Madam Speaker. Across every part of the Territory, from central to the top end, every operator is worried. We are hearing directly from operators and key stakeholders across the industry that they are not getting clear communication or any real support. They are trying to plan, keep staff on, and keep their businesses running, and they are being left to figure it out on their own. Aviation access is also getting worse. To date, Qantas and Jetstar have announced flight cancellations in and out of Darwin, with the impact of Virgin's cancellations still unfolding. We've also been informed that airlines have reduced over 45,000 seats coming into the Territory because of a reduction in services. This is a direct hit to the tourism and hospitality industry before the peak season has even properly begun. Now let's look at the government's response. Earlier this year, the Minister announced the Territory Visitor Strategy 2032. But industry hasn't seen action to match the rhetoric. I'm hearing from operators and people working in the industry that this was an excellently produced, developed, consulted strategy. There is great support for this work, which makes it even more surprising and unclear why this government has not backed it in with funding in this budget. It must be because the Minister has lost sight of tourism being the jobs factory for the Territory. The industry is asking for support, practical, targeted support, such as bringing back the previous Territory tourism voucher implemented by the former Territory Labor government during COVID. We're all here, we can go on holidays. Vouchers that provided immediate demand to a cross-section of the tourism industry in the Territory. We know different circumstances call for different measures. That is why, along with industry, we called for solutions that match different circumstances, Madam Speaker. But the Minister has provided no information or announcement on any targeted relief for operators. It is truly a shame. Whether it's demand stimulation, aviation support, or targeted relief, there has been no clear plan. When we turn to the budget, the gap becomes even clearer. Last year, the CLP government cut tourism funding by 23%, Territory events by 12%, and the screen sector by 30%. This year, even with all that has been building for weeks on the back of severe weather events, fuel issues, aviation issues, and the new visitation strategy, we see nothing new from the CLP government. No new infrastructure, no new investment, no clear pipeline to support growth. In fact, many of the projects being pointed to, such as the Nitmiluk National Park public art installations and Kakadu National Park road upgrades, these were initiated under the former Territory Labor government, Madam Speaker. Even the Minister's barbecue announcement stems from the former Territory Labor government's NT Parks master plan. So the question is, where is the new investment for tourism? Where is the vision and the funding to back up the strategy for this critical sector? Tourism businesses are not just numbers. Behind every business is a Territorian, a family, and they are under pressure. Territorians want and need a government that invests in people's success and a future where every Territorian has the chance to thrive no matter where they live. Tourism is an economic lifeline for our regions, with unique environments and remarkable natural diversity to harness for adventure. An opportunity for visitors to connect deeply with Aboriginal Territorians and the oldest continuous culture through their own business ventures. But right now, the sector is at the mercy of a tourism minister who has done nothing to act on the vision given to her by the stakeholders themselves. Right now, the Territory is being held back by inaction, lack of direction, and short-term thinking. Territorians deserve better than stalled projects and empty promises. And Madam Speaker, that's why I'm speaking against the amendment being tabled. Thank you.
Are there any other speakers? Member for Drysdale.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And Madam Speaker, I thank the member for Nightcliff for his debate on the floor today. And I'm going to go gentle, being his second day.
That's very good.
But member for Nightcliff, I think you'll find when I think there's something to say and call something out, I will say it. And there's a few issues I take with what was just presented. I'll start with the first one. It seems the people of Nightcliff have once again elected a whole of the Northern Territory local member. There are strong Bush members on each side of the floor that can fight for their electorates. So I would encourage the member for Nightcliff to focus on the electorate, the wealthiest electorate, I believe, which is also why the good working people of Drysdale don't need to be lectured on class divisions and what they need as the working people. On infrastructure investment, the people of Drysdale don't forget the long list of promises. What was it, 5 billion unfunded infrastructure projects? 5 billion. So we're going to sit here and say the CLP government isn't investing in infrastructure. Well, what we're not doing is coming up with fairy tale lists, Madam Speaker, of $5 billion. And in Drysdale, that list was just never delivered, never. You could go to the school, oh, this is on the infrastructure list, this is on the infrastructure list, year after year. Well, guess what? the people realised that was never coming. And when we took government, we found out there was only $300 million allocated to the $5 billion or something. I mean, just completely farcical infrastructure list. It's just straight up, I can't use the word lying. It is being completely misrepresentation to the people, and they realise. And so we talk about what's actually happening. I'm very keen to know the member for Nightcliff's position on gas, because it is a clear, I note the interjections, but I would like, we heard about the member for Nightcliff's position on solar. Well, we've heard thoroughly today the importance gas will be. So I'm very keen to hear, not from the Leader of the Opposition, I know she supports gas, and I know she sees gas as a future pipeline, but I would like to know the member for Nightcliff's views on gas in the Northern Territory and the position it plays. Also on housing. So, such advocates for housing, yet we will block 800 houses from entering the market. As I debated with the last member for Nightcliff, the greatest
Opposition Leader.
The greatest rent release in the Northern Territory, in the top end right now, would be Lee Point being developed with 800 leases coming onto the market. It would be the single most powerful tool to lower prices. So, I also asked the new member for Nightcliff, what is your position on Lee Point? And if we're opposed to it, we don't then be coming in and saying, oh, you know, the government's not doing enough about prices. Well, the simple, fastest, and he's a smart man, he's an engineer, he knows when you build houses, the effect on the market is lowering that demand. It's very simple. And so I would like to know, position on gas, not from the Leader of the Opposition. I know she understands the importance. Lee Point and the effect it would have even in my electorate, Madam Speaker. Because as the member for Fong Lim very clearly articulated, when you create supply in one area of the market, it will flow through. And that would ease some of the issues in my electorate of Drysdale. So the other big issue I take, and this is a very sincere, and member for Nightcliff, I thank you for your maiden speech, and I believe you spoke on the heart on many issues. What I do take genuine issue with is this, Madam Speaker. $1.8 billion is what the Paech just uncovered on the shiplift infrastructure spend. $1.8 billion. Now, myself and every Paech member saw the full evidence. We saw the signatories, which was former Chief Minister Michael Gunner and former Chief Minister Eva Lawler, who personally signed for that. I note the interjections. The member for Nightcliff yesterday said that they are his mentors, specifically Michael Gunner. So as we've just uncovered, the greatest transfer of public to private wealth in NT history, which it's not that there was no business case, departments said don't do this. There was no evidence trail. We can't see because cabinet in confidence. I don't know how much other cabinet members would even be privy to what actually occurred. But I know the backbenchers weren't, which would be the member for Daly and the member for Arafura, weren't privy to it. But we saw a $1.8 billion transfer personally signed by Michael Gunner. A member for Nightcliff, I have to call out when I see an issue. If that man is your political mentor, I would ask you to seriously reconsider who you think is worth following, because we've got to put the territory first. The territory is more important than our parties. And I'd say I've got a lot of respect for the Leader of the Opposition. And I'd say maybe take her up as your mentor, as opposed to the man who made the most questionable deal. It's not even questionable. It's $1.8 billion of public money that we will never see again. And leading that inquiry, I will call out that it was disappointing to hear his name mentioned as an inspiration and a mentor. Okay, what do I agree? I do agree with the member for Nightcliff on some things. I do agree I don't like things going soft either, and I like a hard, strong market, and our tourism market is very important. And the fact is we do see some threats to that in the coming season, and there's a litany of issues for that, but it is a major risk for the Northern Territory. Fuel prices are having a big impact on that. But overall, and I'm waiting with very eager anticipation for the federal budget, Madam Speaker, because the biggest thing eating away at our wealth in Drysdale is inflation. It is the single greatest tax on the working class people of Drysdale that exists.
Member for Drysdale, you've got 1 minute left if you'd like to conclude your comments.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. So yes, inflation, and it's something that hasn't been properly addressed today. And there is levers the NT can pull, but whilst national inflation stays at the rate it is, there is nothing any jurisdiction government can truly do. The RBA president stated this week, every Australian household is poorer because of inflation. So when it comes to spending, unless the federal government can control their spending as well, and then for us, which we're doing our part, controlling our spending here, every Territorian will continue to get poorer. And so it's been a massive piece missing from the debate, Madam Speaker, inflation, and I'll speak to it more when I speak to the budget. However, for the people I represent, inflation is eating away at our economic stake. It makes the wealthier wealthier, those that are asset rich, and people in my electorate of Drysdale are getting poorer. And that is why we must control inflation in this country. I thank the member for Nightcliff for his first contribution, and a little taste of spice from myself. So thank you, Madam Speaker. That is all.